March the 9th is called to order. Do we have any amendments to the agenda? If not, I'd like a motion to adopt the agenda of March the 9th Committee of the Whole meeting. Councillor Butler. Mr. Crog. All in favor? So carried.
I know the Councillor Hammond is absent, but I know that she had suggested she was going to bring forward an amendment to discuss something from the Deer Committee, but I don't know if she's here, so, but she did send out an email earlier, maybe yesterday, in respect to that. So if Council chose, maybe later on in the meeting, we could make it a late item, maybe we discuss it again. Okay.
In our delegation section, we have, I'd like to welcome this morning Daniel Pizarro, our Senior Regional Transit Manager, for a presentation as requested by Council. Good morning, Mr. Pizarro.
Good morning, Mayor Conrad, and thank you for inviting me here. Good morning to all the councillors. Always good to be in beautiful Grand Forks, fourth time I've been here. I'm basically, as the Mayor mentioned, I'm the Senior Regional Transit Manager for all of the Kootenays. I can see you've got a full agenda today, so I've got a really brief presentation, which the main purpose of the presentation is just to give you a quick overview of transit, but also how you as elected officials, how we can help you in terms of over the course of the year and your term of making decisions relevant to transit. So my department is basically split into two in terms of the service that we provide. We provide stakeholder communications to you as elected officials, and we're accountable for those two-way communications. I'm the main point of contact to both staff and to elected officials in terms of communications with BC Transit about your service. Internally, at head office, I'm based in Victoria. We have our headquarters there, and we have a full planning, scheduling, marketing and finance team which help in terms of putting the service on the road and delivering the service all year round. The other part of our department really deals with operations and contract management. So you'll see from there, I'm accountable for the health of your system and looking at strategies how to move it forward and improve the service. The key to our service is that we are a service and it is meeting the needs of the customers. So really just trying to hear back from the public, understanding, making sure we're doing full consultation and understanding what is needed on the road and balancing up what's achievable within, obviously, as all the services are restricted by budget. Who is BC Transit? So a lot of you will know this, but in general terms, we're the provincial authority that's responsible for both the planning, funding, the operation of all transit services that's outside of Metro Vancouver, so their transit service is delivered by transit. We have a fleet of over 1,000 buses, 1,000 vehicles, both light, medium and heavy duty. Well, that means just different types of buses. The buses that you have here are light, smaller buses that are used in more rural type service. We actually work across 130 communities in BC, and we have 81 different transit systems. We have partnerships with, we work for, technically, for 58 local government partners, for which you are one. We work with 18 private management companies, so the actual companies that are delivering the service on the ground, because outside of Victoria, BC Transit doesn't deliver the service. And we work with 14 not-for-profits who also help, and 5 public organisations. So you can see it's a wide scheme of different partners that we work with. One of the most important things I find for elected officials just to get their head around is the shared services model and the benefits of it, which I'll take you through. The responsibilities are set out on the right. You can see the local government department is responsible for planning the community and transit priorities and the routes. You guys actually set the service level, approve budgets. Importantly, you set the fares, and also the local government partner keep 100% of the revenue from fares. So it's always in the best interest to try and maximise how many people are paying fares and using transit. In turn, BC Transit, we we basically turn your plans and your requests into operating and capital plans. We work with the province, because obviously the partnership is split pretty much 50-50 between funding between the local government partner and the province, to try and get funding, and we basically manage the operation of your service, as well as managing your capital program. You can see there just the structure of how we work with the BC Transit acting as the middleman there, putting service on the road. So the benefit, this is very important, the benefits of the shared services model compared to other transit systems in Canada is that we have much higher passengers per hour. The shared services model allows for a much lower cost per hour and a lower operating cost per hour. Really, it's about bulk buying, bulk procurement. By working together as all of the municipalities together, we can bulk procurement. We work on, a big part of our job is contract management strategies, fleet and fixed asset management, and efficiencies across administration. We're trying to put expertise in key business areas. So, as an example, rather than you having a marketing or a finance department relevant to transit, every community has it at our head office in BC Transit. One of the main things an independent review found that happened 3 years ago, I suppose, was that BC Transit compares very favourably to other Canadian systems, particularly in terms of ridership. We have much higher ridership and efficiencies provided by that service. So just a quick overview of your system here. Some of you will know this. You deliver around 1,600 hours of service per year. Your ridership, which is one of our most important measurements, has been pretty steady actually over the last few years, around 7,000 passengers. And you're averaging around 4.4 rides per hour. So that's 4.4 rides, passengers on a bus every service hour, which it's not certainly not at the top, but it's certainly not at the bottom compared to other similar type systems. And it is quite difficult sometimes to compare systems in BC because as you know, every community is so unique. Again, you'll know that you've got that fixed route between Grand Forks and Greenwich, which runs on the Friday from 8:30. So, and then you have your on-request service, which runs from 8:30 to 3:30 every day. You have a fleet of 2 vehicles. One vehicle is in use and one is used as a spare. Your operating company here is obviously the Interior Health Authority. So just quickly in terms of funding, again, a lot of you will know this. The boundary transit system is known as what we call a paratransit system. So it's basically a blend of conventional service, which is fixed route service, so where you have a schedule, and custom, which is better known as handy-dart service. You have a mix of the two, where you're providing that fixed route once a week, and then what you call your on-demand service here, which seems to work quite well. Just in terms of the stats at the bottom, on the right-hand side at the bottom there, shows what you're paying for your transit system, so your net share of $63,000. You can see there you're paying about $10,000, and again, the revenue has been quite steady for the last few years, around $10,000. So the more revenue that you're bringing in, the lower the net municipal share is. So there's a real importance to work in partnership and try and maximise the amount of people using transit to bring the cost down, to the tax subsidy down, and the cost to the public. Just quickly in terms of guiding documents, in 2011, a service review was done here. In smaller and medium-sized communities, we tend to do a service review every 5 years. For those of you who haven't seen that document, it is on our website. I'll just summarise the main outcomes. The potential to add more fixed route service was looked at. However, it was deemed that your current on-demand service was working quite well, and potentially adding fixed route service wouldn't really see that much more. That may have changed as we go forward, and that's something to discuss. One of the key things, again, is the system that you have seems to work quite well. So it's very much a case of trying to promote it and raise awareness within the community to use it. Grand Forks, like many places in BC, has a large seniors population. Our ridership across the province tends to be mainly school kids, commuters and seniors. So very important as elected officials to think about what is the need of seniors in relation to transit and how they can use it and how it affects their daily life. Just in terms of guiding documents, I'll go over this quite quickly. The service reviews and the work that we do with local communities is really there to help you as elected officials. We don't expect you to be experts. We try and provide as much support as possible for you to make informed decisions. One of the key things is for you guys to think about how do you make your transit service fit for purpose? What are you trying to do with it? Are you more interested in covering as much area as possible or being more targeted in certain areas? So very important that if you have questions, you come through us and we can certainly talk about what your priorities are. One thing that we've been trying to do over the few years at BC Transit is bringing performance measures. This just is a tool again for elected officials to evaluate how your system is working, trends. Again, if we look at Grand Forks, we can tell quite quickly what kind of ridership you're getting here. And we can really just use it to evaluate service and make evidence-based planning and recommendations to you and ensure that, important in this day and age, that we're using the dollars in transit is being used as effectively and efficiently as possible. So just a quick kind of summarize at the end here. In terms of the service that I personally provide to you as Grand Forks, as elected officials and to staff, we have kind of 4 touch points every year. I'll start kind of at the end. The performance summary in May or June basically tells you what happened the year before. Okay? So that will show you how your ridership's growing or going down, how your revenue's performing, a cost breakdown really of how the transit system is working. Then we move to what's called the Transit Improvement Program in June and August. If there are decisions or conversations where you want to expand or you hear from the public that you want more service in a particular basis, we then work with you to put a request in to the province for additional hours to provide that service the next year. That's an important process because obviously we're getting that from a lot of communities, so it's good to get that information in and make sure that we represent Grand Forks properly. Followed by that, your staff get a 3-year forecast, which will show you your transit costs for the next 3 years. And then finally, you receive your annual operating agreement, which you'll actually this year be receiving very soon, which shows you the dollars on the road for that coming year. So we get a lot of frequently asked questions, and I will email to staff. I've got a whole backup section of this, of the kind of questions that you'll hear a lot from the public. This is just really a snapshot, but it helps you as elected officials to understand the process, that when people want additional service, what's behind providing that service. I just mentioned that obviously anything to do with expansion requires us to go through the province. Any changes to service can take a fair amount of time because we have to plan, we have to come through council, we have to produce a new riders guide, and also if we need a new fleet, we have to order a bus. A bus can take up to 18 months at times to order. As I say, I'll provide this information as a whole 4 or 5 pages for you guys to look at. And just finally then, in terms of communication opportunities, these are the other kind of touch points. We actively invite local elected officials to try and attend our BC Transit workshop. We're starting to see more and more at Harrison Hot Springs at the end of April. It's a good chance, even if you come for a day or two, just to get a real feel and understanding of transit. We're at the local government association meetings. We're present at UBCM, and just like this Transit 101 presentation, I'm available to come and present at any time, depending on what the question of the issue is. And also, I'm in touch with staff through the regional district of Coogee Boundary. So just finally, this is just some of the things that you can do as elected officials. It's very important, to support transit. Very important to us in terms of planning that transit is considered at an early stage of planning in your community. So we try as much as possible to link in with your regional growth strategy, with your OCP, any other plans, so that transit isn't seen as an afterthought. There have been times in other communities where somebody's built a hospital and then told us they built it and come for transit, and as silly as it seems, it would have been a lot better to know that earlier and be able to plan transit around it, particularly when you're talking about trying to get seniors to a lot of places around this province. Final one, just development referral program. That email there, if anything's going on from staff and your planning department, if you let us know, that aids us to get involved in that process early. So that's all from me. As I say, I will email this presentation to to staff. There's a few other pages at the end. So thanks for your time. I'm open for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Pizarro.
Thank you.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. Your worship, through you to our staff or Mr. Pizarro, the $63,000 that is the share, municipal share, that is a regional service?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, the amount that the city pays is approximately $24,000, but the regional district provides this service. So this is just an overview of what the services that the regional district is providing for the city of Grand Forks. So it's generally these types of services are looked after by the regional district and they're regional in nature. So yes, we pay $23,447 towards this service.
Councillor.
I was just curious, on these buses, do you have bicycle carriers?
On all of our buses across all of our fleet, we now have bike carriers. They take 2 buses at the front of the bus. Yeah, and they, in rural communities, it tends to be within during daylight hours because they obstruct the bike rack obstructs the headlights.
Oh, okay.
So after dark, we don't tend to take bikes on board.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Crowe.
Yes, thank you. I've always thought that we need a local transit system more defined than what we have here. So, and I understand that a lot of the cost would be going back to us. But you talk about the how well the system appears to be working. And it does when we go back and look at things, but it's the catch-22. We say, this is good because this is all the ridership and that's been required and requested. But you don't know until you actually try and offer that system what it would be, like a local system going with regular stops around town. So if we wanted to go there, what would the process be? Would we get help with the planning and proposals as far as structures and all that stuff?
Yeah, it's a good question. In terms of process, as I mentioned in the presentation, we did the previous service review in 2011, so you're pretty much in line for your next service review. There's 2 things to consider. The first option is to look at, to answer your question, yes, the request will just need to come into BC Transit through the regional district of boundary to do some kind of a service review, depending on what you request. 2 considerations are whether you're going to use your existing hours in your system, as I mentioned in the presentation, and try and basically rejig what you have to create a fixed route service and move away from your on-demand, or even potentially do a bit of both, which you kind of already have. The other option is whether you want to expand your service, because that obviously then falls into our process of having to request additional funding for the province. But just in specific relation to your question, we take the request in, we have a look at the options, we will provide you with service options and the costs, or if we're doing it cost neutral, and then if it's signed off to move forward, we will help you implement that service.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just curious what our fares are at right now for our on-demand and also the trip to Greenwood.
So your local service is $1.50, and your service from in between Greenwood and Grand Forks is $1.75. You also have the option for, particularly for seniors, to use the BC Bus Pass, which I'm not sure if you're aware of, which is a pass that costs $45. It's run by the Ministry of Social Development. Looking at your ridership figures, it's not very prevalent. Not many people actually use that pass here in Grand Forks, which surprised me, because it's a very cheap way of using transit. So that's maybe one recommendation going forward, which maybe we work on a bit of a marketing plan to really just promote to seniors that this service is available for them because they technically, they wouldn't have to pay anything after they paid the $45 for the whole year, and that's a good way of trying to increase ridership in your Grand Forks.
Councillor Butler.
Where would the seniors purchase this ride pass in town?
The pass is administered by the ministry, so it goes, Easy Transit doesn't sell the pass and it's not sold locally. They have to go, I think it's either through the website or they call up. I can leave the details. It's all on the ministry website. It's also listed on the Easy Transit website as well.
Councillor Butler.
Because it's just for seniors, a lot of them aren't online, right? They don't have computers, they don't go to websites, so that might be one of the reasons why they're not accessing it. If they were somewhere in town, they could purchase it, it would make it easier.
I'm not sure whether that's possible at the moment, but you can call them as well. It doesn't have to be. I can certainly leave the number and I can work with staff to certainly promote that locally.
CEO.
Mr. Mayor, what we could do is we could work with the representative and we could try to find a way to maybe work it through our organization where we could potentially help the customers at the front desk, maybe when they come in to do this. But the other thing we could do is advertise it in our newspaper as well, that this stuff is available through our council information that we'll be putting on a regular basis. So maybe that's an opportunity for us to explore. But before we do that, what we'll do is we'll find out what BC Transit can offer us and how we can do that and how we can integrate it into our services.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Do we have any other questions? So can I have a motion to receive the presentation from Mr. Pizarro? Councillor Crawford, Councillor Thompson, all in favor? So carried. Thank you, Mr. Pizarro.
Thanks for your time. Thank you very much.
Our next delegation is from the Grand Forks Community Trails Society. I'd like to welcome Mr. Chris Moslin on his request for assistance with the placement of the Barraclet bench on the Observation Mountain Trail. Good morning, Mr. Moslin.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, councilors, the gallery. Yeah, I'm all about transit too. Green transit, just like commuting. And I know many of us have shared the vision of a bus service for Grand Forks. Anyhow, on to our presentation. I'm here today to accomplish a couple things. First, just to reintroduce council to the Grand Forks Community Trail Society and to make a specific request as per our stewardship agreement for council assistance for what we're calling the Paracalcan bench. The Grand Forks Community Trail Society has been around for quite a while, and we've worked pretty hard with council over the last decade or so. We are a registered nonprofit private charitable society, and we are the official stewards of the Trans-Canada Trail from Eagle to Cascade, which is a significant amount of trail for volunteers to look after. We are also official stewards, and we have a stewardship agreement with the city that the city adopted last May, which gives us basically the work to look after trails within the city. And part of our stewardship obligation is to make recommendations to the city and requests, and that's what we're about this morning. The goals of the society, well, to develop and promote a system of trails throughout around the city of Grand Forks. This is becoming quite an accomplishment both of the society and the city and of the larger community as we become known for our trail systems. We're trying to enhance recreational opportunities as green initiatives for the citizens of Grand Forks. We have looked after the commuter challenge or bike to work before to try to get people on the trails. And one of our probably less recognized but very important objectives is to promote trails that are accessible to all citizens, including those who are physically challenged. So we look after trails that are everywhere from single track up a mountainside to paved trails. It's quite a scope. Well, I just have a few points here, because the accomplishments of the society are many over the decade, more than I can list here. But we have worked really cooperatively with the city and other local governments to make those accomplishments, including the recent paving of the 1.7 waterfront trail from the Roxall parking lot to the nursery trestle, where we combined with the efforts of the Trans-Canada Trail Foundation, the city, and the province to bring that to fruition. One of the things I'm also very proud of is that we worked with council to complete what was called the RINC project, Recreation Infrastructure Canada project, to pave the trails up to the Black Train Bridge and to add trails to Curly. There's that beautiful lit trail behind Curly. And I believe also the highway crossing at 25th, part of that RINC project as well. So a great deal of capital has gone in. We do smaller projects, added stairs to the Darrell Creek Trestle, the nursery trestle. And we tried really hard to work with other trails associations in the community. It seems that Canadians love their trails. It's the way they interact with this huge and magnificent landscape. But some people like to walk trails, some people like to ride on motorcycles, some people like to bike, some people like mountain bikes, some people. There's a plethora of trails associations, and the city is part of the signer too, the Boundary Trails Agreement that we signed in 2013. And we've been working, as well as the city has, on the Observation Mountain Trail, which I'm going to talk to you about a little bit more in just a minute. And we redecked the nursery trestle in October 2014. The society applied for the funding for that, got the go-ahead from the province, and got partnership funding from the regional district to make that a reality. And in the past, if I know council still, the environment committee, if it ever gets reformed, we would be glad to help with your commuter challenge or any other method council comes up with for encouraging green transit within the community. We worked really hard. Mr. Allen basically challenged the city, challenged the society to come up with a vision. What is it you think we can accomplish for trails in the future? And so the society worked really hard last year. We worked, and I apologize to council, but I was going to bring you all a map, but I forgot it. But this was presented to council last year. And this map is basically a map of existing trails. All the trails that you see there exist. But what we were trying to propose was, well, if you're looking to do some upgrades, here's some possibilities for you, including number 2 on that, which is my favorite, the underpass on the Central Avenue Bridge. Because I believe that will significantly increase the pedestrian traffic. Sorry, Mr. Crock. Your pedestrian traffic in the downtown core. Anyhow, we worked pretty hard with that. We presented this vision to the city, and we also submitted it to Area D last spring as they are busy working on the revision of their official community plan, which we are expecting to come out this year. And we take this map and we, in various different forms, and we put it on kiosks and we put it in tourist magazines and pamphlets as much as we can. And this is what we're about. We're trying to work really hard to make this vision happen. And today I'm in front of you because of item number 6, which is a squiggly yellow line, which represents the Observation Mountain Trail. And there's a picture of the new kiosk that the city put up at the Wildlife Hall, complete with the signage. And some of the volunteers, some of whom are here today, who worked really hard to get the trailhead going. Now the trailhead is a little bit, you can sort of see the gravel trail going up, and the trailhead swings around and up the mountain. The Observation Mountain Trail is also known as the Grand Forks Grind. It's a very challenging trail. It's steep. It's a kilometer. And depending on your conditioning, you can make it anywhere from, I think I've heard somebody making it in 12 minutes to my speed, which is more like 35, 40 minutes. It is mostly on city property. This trailhead is on city property. And on the south side of Observation Mountain. And this trail, like a lot of the trails in Grand Forks, was created and maintained by volunteers over many years. So even though we're reworking on this trail, we are sort of redeveloping it because it's been in place for generations. The city, in the previous council, really took the vision that the trails were a feature amenity of our community. And that the more we integrated trails into the city as infrastructure for pedestrian corridors, the greener our city became and the healthier our community became. And this Observation Mountain Trail is a major project of our Community Trail Society this year. What we're asking is we are asking specifically in this presentation for city assistance with the Para-Pelton bench. Most of you in here in this room I know knew Peter really well. Peter was a longtime Grand Forks resident and businessman who contributed a great deal to his community as a volunteer and a leader over many years. He contributed $1,000 to the Trail Society to improve the Observation Mountain Trail specifically so that we could go up there and buy our shovels or pay our volunteers, buy our lunch or whatever, to get the trail carved and redeveloped and to make it more accessible so that other people, a wider scope of people, could get up that Grand Forks grind. He wanted the trail dedicated to his own children, who predeceased Peter, and Peter himself died suddenly in this past December. And we know he would enjoy the city below, the view of the city below. This picture that we're taking is very close to where we are considering putting the bench. And you can see that the views below are quite beautiful. This is a beautiful time of year to be up there right now because the wildflowers are just coming. I was up there this weekend and there was lots of people up there, coming mostly up from the wildlife hall from the new kiosk. So our request is that the city assist the society and the community in placing a bench on the Observation Mountain Trail overlooking Grand Forks on city property. Okay, the city has a sponsor a bench program, and which we could have just filled in and sent it off. We had talked to Dolores about that, except that it says where the choice of where to put the bench didn't cover Observation Mountain Trail. So, whoops, wrong button. But first off, we're hoping that the city will give us permission to mount the bench on city property adjacent to the trail, and sharing the cost of a bench and a plaque, approximately $18 through its sponsor a bench program. Okay, the cost of the bench is $1,800. That's a city bench. We're not really yet committed to putting a city bench up there. We think there might be more appropriate designs for us. But we're looking for the city to help make this possible by sharing the cost, or if not the cost, providing some of the labor as a granting kind to pack the cement, the water, and the bench from the trailhead to the lookout, which is about 200 meters. But it's a steep 200 meters. Okay, and we certainly invite the council to come celebrate with the community when we do finish the project later this year. So at this point, I hope I've accomplished my two objectives: to reintroduce the society and its vision to council, and to make a specific request that the council assist the society in the placement of a parapelican bench on the Observation Mountain Trail this spring, which I think brings me to the end of my presentation. And I stand ready for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mosley. Do I have any questions? Councillor Butler.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Muslim. Thanks for coming. I enjoy your trails very much and walk them regularly. Looks like a great project. I'm wondering, these benches, 1,800 for a bench seems really pricey. I'm not sure where the city's getting their benches. Have you looked at any local groups to help you construct a bench?
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Butler, for your question. We certainly have. We are considering other designs. The city benches are, as you walk around the trails in the city, you'll see them. They come basically in two shapes, one with arms and one without arms. The city sponsorship program basically includes $1,800 gets you the plaque and the installation.
Yes.
And what's even more important is looking after it in the long run. Right? Those are beautiful benches. And I know they are expensive. If you start buying a stainless steel bench, we had another commemorative bench placed out at Cascade Falls this past year, and that cost me cost close to $2,000 too. They are expensive benches, but you're quite right. We are also considering, why don't we just do something with rock, and try to make something up there that's going to be rock, and it would be a lot less. Sure, probably involve more labor, but would be a lot less. So we haven't got a specific thing in mind. We're trying to, as per our stewardship agreement, tick it off as what we'd like to accomplish, and we're asking the city for partnership with that. And whether the bench turns out to be a standard city bench or something more special, well, we're still working on that.
And I forgot to tell you, I'll help you pack it up.
You're on.
Yeah.
Councillor Thompson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Moslin, for your presentation. The funding to purchase the bench, have you got that in place?
Yes, basically, Councillor Thompson, to answer your question, we do. The society has the means to purchase the bench. If we decide to go with that, really what we're asking the city this morning is, can we put it out there on the edge of city property on Observation Mountain Trail? It's on city property, but you've got to consider that it's a little bit different than your other benches, right? Your other benches are basically very close to where traffic or vehicles can get to them, right? They're more established lower down trails. Okay, but yes, to answer your question, we do have the funding in place.
Do I have any other questions? Councillor Krog.
Yes, so it's 200 meters
Yes,
from the closest you can get a vehicle,
yes.
and not being metrically inclined, that's a little more than a yard. Just
200 yards.
200 yards. Okay, and that's, so that's the closest that we can get a vehicle, so
Yeah.
that's what you're looking for is.
Yes, to our knowledge, the
Yeah.
closest we can get up to the actual site.
Yes, okay,
It is a steep 200 meters, but you're well rewarded. 200 meters, because you end up with a beautiful view, panoramic view of the city and some very kind of historic sites up there too. The history of our community is on show and on display when you walk up Observation Mountain. One side you're looking down the slag pile, the other side you're looking down at the city, and there's the old city water tank up there. Quite a lot of and the old city power lines are up there too. Go ahead, sorry.
Okay, sorry. Through you to staff, is there any issue with the area that they're looking as a placement for the bench?
So, Mr. Mayor, part of this process is we would have to send one of our manager of operations up there to take a look at it. and then determine if it would be suitable, if we have to do anything from a occupational health and safety perspective to prepare our staff to be able to take materials up. So based on the in-kind piece, we'd have to talk to the manager of operations to determine if it would be accessible. I don't, based on my experience of being up there, I don't see it being too big of an issue, but I just like to make sure we haven't overlooked anything.
Councillor Ross.
Thanks very much, Chris. Mr. Mayor, thank you. Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I like the idea of bringing the community together for projects like this. It's positive and it's fun, like the park bench challenge sort of thing. I joined Julia Butler. I'd love to pack something up there myself, and I really enjoyed the trails. So I just really like the idea of this positive green initiative of getting people outside. I love the bluffs in this area. I spent a lot of time, as some of you know, up in the bluffs and on the mountain ranges here, and making them more accessible and having a bench up there for people to sit and reflect is really important. But I think bringing this out to the community and getting the community on board, the gentleman in question that this is in memory of, I'm sure if we put it out there, there's going to be a lot of people who would not only contribute physically but financially to a project like this. And I think making it artistic and beautiful is also, really is fun and inspiring as well. So yeah, thanks very much. I'm really excited about this initiative.
Thank you, Councilor.
Mr. Allen.
Mr. Mayor, just for the city's grant and aid policy or community organization support policy is within council's purview. It does work for us to be able to provide in-kind contributions. If council was to consider providing funding allocation, it would have to be included into the financial plan, which I would caution council on doing that, because you will have a continuation of community groups coming forward, because there's always a good cause. And not that any cause is better than the other, but it's just something that council put this in with the intention to make sure they weren't taking money away from their core services, which are water, sewer, garbage, sanitary, electrical, roads, to get kind of taken off in this direction. So it's important for council to understand that. But when we do this, the in-kind contribution is something that we do generally have. We generally have bags of concrete. That's what council was meaning to do, is be able to say, where can we give a little bit of sweat equity in the project?
Thank you. Councillor Crook.
Yeah, I think that the location, the bench, is a fitting tribute to Peter. I was there when he at the opening of the kiosk or the opening of the trail, and his pledge to funds to help upgrade that trail so more of the community as well as tourists could enjoy it. Just through you to staff, do you need a motion to send staff up the mountain, or are they just gonna go?
Well, we are going to refer this request to our
Yes.
regular meeting.
Yeah, so the question is, we're gonna refer it to the regular meeting, but do we want, do we need a motion at that meeting is what I'm trying to figure out.
Mr. Mayor, I think the idea behind this, if council wanted to support the initiative, and then we would work with them to figure out what we could provide. That would just be council providing their endorsement, and we would work within the policy to be able to provide the support as needed.
Do we have any other questions from the gallery? So in this case, could I have a motion, please, to refer the request from Mr. Moslin of the Grand Forks Community Trail Society to refer to our regular meeting on March the 9th. Councillor Ross, Councillor Crog. All in favor? So carried. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Moslin.
Mr. Mayor. I think you need a motion to get Councilor Crog to talk.
Do we have a city helicopter? Financial plan.
Our next delegation is Mr. George Longden from the PICKLE-BALL players. A request to convert one of the tennis courts at Barbara Ann Park into a pickleball park. Mr. Longden.
Yes, good morning. Thank you, Mayor and members of council. I've come before this organization in many different capacities, and this is a new one for me. Hope I pressed the right button here. For Chris, is that closed? Yep. That's the forward button. Okay. So, question that people ask, what is pickleball? It's a live rapid game for all ages and abilities. Basically, it was created with one thing in mind, simply to have fun, to be outside and have fun. Basically, it's a game that's relatively quick to learn, and depending on your age, you have to be at least walking, and pretty much that's the only requirement. Pickleball was originally played on a badminton-sized court with special paddles. Balls used are similar to wiffle balls, slightly smaller. Lower net, and the wiffle ball, it slows the game down and allows the game to be accessible to people of all ages and abilities. And it still allows people to be competitive. In addition to the modified net and gear, there are several key rules that make the game more accessible. The big deal in tennis is that the power serve is the big thing. Pickleball, the ball must bounce once on each side of the net, which slows the game down and allows the game to be accessible to more players and extends the play for fun. It was originally invented on Bainbridge Island, just outside of Seattle. The whole idea is to have a game that can be fun for every member of the family. So, pickleball in Canada. Pickleball is widely recognized as North America's fastest growing sports. In Canada, there are about 290 places to play. There are way more in the United States. According to Pickleball Canada, we have about 14,000 players in Canada. By far the largest number in British Columbia. The West always leads, right? Right now, we have 2 courts. A few years ago, the Players Association asked that the lines be drawn on the courts at Barbara Park. The problem is that it's quite confusing because there's 2 different set of lines on that court. There are also way more pickleball players in Grand Forks, particularly in the summertime, and then there are places to play. So what happens is that the facilities at Barbara Park, which are largely, were originally designed as tennis courts, are underused because we now have great facilities at Grand Forks Secondary School for tennis players. So currently, as I said, there are 2 courts laid out. I'm going to try and turn on the laser here. These 2 players here are actually from Christina Lake. They were here as tourists and discovered that there were pickleball courts and came out to play last summer. So here's my modest proposal. What we would like to ask the city to do is to take one of the 2 tennis courts at Barbara Park and repurpose it into 4 dedicated pickleball courts. Now, Trail has done it, and correct me if I'm wrong, $16,000, is that the number?
16 to 18.
Yeah, the number that we have from Trail is about $16,000 for the conversion. Oh, come on. Now, it's interesting, the whole thing of repurposing pickleball courts has become quite common. This is a screenshot from the U.S. Pickleball Association website, and they actually have a whole section on their website on taking tennis courts which are underused as our society ages, those people who used to be avid tennis players, and I believe there are some here today, who have become pickleball players. So there's a whole movement to take the tennis courts which are underused and turning them into pickleball courts. Now the plan we have would see one of the 2 courts, if you think of those blue segments as being tennis courts, what we would like to see is taking one of them the one on the right, and turning it into 4 dedicated pickleball courts. So the advantages, big advantages, less confusion for players of either tennis or pickleball. It would allow for increased utilization of existing facilities. It doesn't preclude someone who is a dedicated tennis player from going to Barbara Ann Park and playing there, but it does allow other people who are pickleball players or become pickleball players a place to do that in the community. And this is another community asset for both residents and visitors alike. What I've discovered, I'm new to pickleball. What I've discovered is that there's amazing tourism potential. Pickleball has become a movement. This is just from the February newsletter, the upcoming tournaments. Now, I missed the women's party of Vallarta, which is too bad. But for communities around our area, there are major tournaments happening as players come into the community. They create activity in the business community. I mean, the Canadian Open spring tournament, the Western Canadian Open is in Kelowna in July. I believe they have something over 600 pickleball players in Kelowna. And just think of all of the tourism potential once we're known as a place that has pickleball courts. So on that note, one of the things that is kind of interesting, as our seniors age, we all pack around our smartphones or our iPads, and we want to find out about something about a community. We go to the web, and we go to the U.S. Pickleball Association, and all of the provinces in Canada and the states of the United States are listed there. And when you click on them, you find their number 22 and 20, number 21 and 22, actually 21, 22 and 23 are listed on this website as places in Grand Forks where you can play pickleball. So we're on the map as a place where people can play, and that's going to drive tourism eventually. So I have some letters of support. I've given one to the staff for your files, and I've given one also to your CEO. Your Worship. So we have some people in the community from that list are here today. There's a lot of support for this in the community, and I've had support from the regional district. We've had support from the Recreation Commission with a letter of support. This is an area or a sport that will only grow. As our population ages, we look for ways to be physically active on our trails in the community. And this is another way for people to be physically active in the community. It's another draw for tourists to come here. It's another asset that is underused that could be repurposed and would be better used. So, do you have any questions?
Councilor Crowe.
There, we're on. Quick question. You mentioned that or the writing mentioned that it's the same size as badminton.
Roughly the same size.
Roughly the same size. Is the only difference then the height of the net?
Yes, because the
You
badminton
have
net's
to,
quite
yeah,
high.
and you have to lower it 3 feet.
Badminton nets are quite high.
Yes, and then you have to lower it,
Yes,
right, to
30,
do pickleball.
34 inches?
Pickleball.
yes.
So have you looked at the concept of a combo? So rather than just put in permanent lower nets, that you put in the ability to raise the nets up and down so that then you have the option of pickleball and badminton depending on who's there. It's just a matter of raising and like just taller poles,
Right.
basically.
I think that's a great idea.
There's no demand for that. I don't think. Or
There's no demand until you announce it.
Yeah.
And then the badminton players will come from everywhere.
Yeah.
It's worth
Sure.
exploring. It's worth exploring.
Yeah, I'm just thinking the use of space and the more multi-use we can get out of stuff. You know, just the ability that it could be quickly converted if some people wanted to play badminton. Then you
Absolutely.
get
I think it's a great
maps.
idea.
Councillor Ross.
Thanks, George. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I enjoyed Googling pickleball and looking at the video. I like the noise it makes. Yeah, I used to play badminton and tennis and squash and anything I could whack. I really enjoyed it. So this looks like a combo of all three that I could be really bad at. What? So a couple questions. How accessible are these? Are the rackets? And where would you purchase one? And could there be perhaps a little community collection or of rackets so that people can come and try it out? That would be sort of a nice idea, just to make it a little bit more popular, because people don't have a racket. I mean, it is a new game, and I don't want to go out and buy a racket if I'm not sure I really want to do it. So if we had some, I don't know, how expensive are the rackets, George?
Bonnie, can you answer?
I think they're from $60 to $90 for a paddle.
16 or
660.
60?
And we all have extra paddles, so if anybody wants to come out and play, we'll lend you our paddle so you
All
can
right.
try the game.
Okay, yeah, so it'd be nice if there was some, like a little workshop or something where people can come and have an introductory and have a go.
That's how I got started. I just showed up and gave me paddle. and
Right,
I
yeah,
just- I was hooked.
yeah.
There
Well-
are basic wooden ones available for probably $25 for beginners to try, and then choose to carry on with the game. One might purchase your own for 60 or so.
Right, yeah,
What should be mentioned, probably one of the other reasons that this time this presentation is being made is that those courts are in disrepair, somewhat of disrepair, and they need some maintenance done. Otherwise, they'll probably, I would think, fall apart. So as you can see on that photograph right there, there's a big crack, and those cracks appear all around those courts down at Barbrand Park. And so this might be a good time to change the configuration.
Okay, so basically you're asking council, the city, to approve the repair and repurposing of the courts at the expense of the city.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. Through you to our staff, or perhaps to George, do we have any stats on the use of the tennis courts, both at the high school and at Barbrand Park? And I'm not opposed to the pickleball court by any means. It sounds like something I even might try someday. But I just wondered if we had any stats on the use.
Not that I'm aware of.
Thank you. Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've been fortunate enough to have some pickleball rackets loaned to me one day, and I've tried it out. It's a lot of fun. My kids enjoy it too, and they're young, and we could all play together as a family. And living quite close to Barbrand Park, I can attest to the fact that they are down there all the time playing pickleball, because we hear the ping from the rackets, and it's the sound of exercise. It's good. I'm curious about the cost for, you're wanting to put a fence in between the two courts, I imagine, so that when the ball goes over, because the court's facing the other way, I believe that was part of your proposal, to put a fence in between the two?
Well, we're willing to work with the city in terms, I mean, this is going to be a process, we're at the beginning of the process. And, how it all plays out on the ground, I think will be a matter of discussion between the pickleball players who live, as you say, close by, and who are major, like there's going to be an influx of them as they come home from their winters in the south. I think I can see a whole discussion process happening with the city, and certainly we're quite going to work with the city in terms of, actually the solution that comes out of this.
Gentleman in the back.
I was going to ask about the stats too, but the other question was going to be, you are talking about leaving one of the tennis courts in Barbrand.
That's correct.
Yeah, okay.
Would you please be able to identify?
Oh, Les Johnson. Yeah. This was part of the conversation I saw yesterday, a spawn on Facebook when somebody brought this up. So.
CEO, Mr. Allen.
Mr. Mayor, one of the things that would be prudent for us to do is consider if there's any grant opportunities to undertake this type of conversion under the Healthy Communities initiatives that the provincial government spurs on. The other thing would be, looking at the resurfacing of the court. That can be a quite an expensive undertaking. We look at that, it's not just a simple, we can go in there and we can do some crack sealing, but then that creates little ridges that are not necessarily conducive to the ball getting a proper bounce. So when we look at this, the resurfacing of the courts, depending on the sub-base material, it may be a considerable project. The simple conversion project that they were talking about is something that we might be able to look at, maybe a partnership, maybe the regional district would like to have some support in something like this. But this becomes a situation where the city carries the costs, and the people in the regional district, they don't pay taxes for those things. But this is the opportunity for the regional district to participate in something like this. Maybe it's something that we could bring to the Rec Commission to see if they would like to consider any initiatives there. But simply for the city to take this on at this point, without seeking any grants, wouldn't be appropriate. I would suggest that we would want to at least spend the next couple months looking at grant opportunities that may be available.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Do I have any other questions? Councilor Thompson.
Through you to our staff, we would probably need to have the costing done on the repurposing as well, or we would want to move forward.
Just further to that, what I would recommend then for us would be to, in order for us to put our financial plan together properly, what we would have to do is put together a briefing consideration and have that approved by council under the criteria under grants first. And then if there were some grants that we were able to access, then we would be able to proceed with the project, having council support and knowing that there's grant funding. But we could include it into the financial plan, but what Councillor Thompson said was correct, because we want to consider the whole project, because if we were able to get a stimulus fund of some sort, we would want to basically go after everything in that respect.
Thus, once we referred it to the evening meeting, we can discuss it further. Councillor Crogg.
Yeah, just, is that the major or a major part of the plan is the resurfacing, or are you more interested in repurposing? And then depending on when, then the courts could be, or that court could be resurfaced, or is that a huge part of your plan?
I would say that the two are integrated. They're integral. I mean, if you're going to do a repurposing, then it makes sense at that same time to do some repair and resurfacing of the whole court. Or even let's say that of the one court that we're thinking of in terms of the repurposing process, maybe that could be resurfaced as a first step. So it could be, it could be staged in several stages.
Councillor Crogg.
And the cost guesstimates from the 16 or 18,000, I can't remember. Yeah. Did that include any resurfacing or just repurposing for theirs?
I'm not sure. I'd have to say, it was a guesstimate.
I can speak to that, and that is, Trail would be a really good resource because they did exactly the same thing. They had 3 tennis courts that they side by each, and they rededicated one of them and resurfaced all of them. I believe 2 tennis courts and made 4 pickleball courts as recently as last year. So they would be kind of a real concrete resource there in terms of cost.
Thanks, Dave.
We'd be there. Trail.
Could you please be so kind as identify?
I'm sorry, I'm Dave Schneider's man.
Thank you. Mr. Longman, question. Are you an official club or organization at this point, or you just have
We're just a player, just a group of people who are playing, yes.
Are you planning to form yourselves into an official club or
I'm trying
organization?
not to take another hat on, to be honest with you. I already do lots of things in this community. I'm just, I guess by default, I'm here as their spokesperson, but whether or not that becomes an official association, I guess is something that we'll have to discuss.
Thank you. Lady in the back, please.
My name's Bonnie Olson. We're not an official club and we haven't applied to be as such yet, but that is a possibility in the future. Right now, we have about 14 to 16 players that play in the summer, three afternoons a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And there is 2 tennis courts there. And if there are tennis players playing on, which doesn't happen very often, but if there are tennis players playing on one court, that leaves us 1 court to play with that many people, and 4 people play at one time. So you're waiting to get on the court. So that's just one point I wanted to make. So if we had 4 courts, we'd have enough courts for players to play. And the courts are definitely in bad shape right now, and they do need fixing badly.
Thank you. Lady in the front.
Doris Albert, and we've been playing tennis for a long time here in the community. And the way we see the tennis courts, they are actually very soundly built, but they do have cracks. And I think at this point, all we really would need to do is fix the cracks and redo the lines. And I don't think it would require resurfacing until a later date.
So are you requesting the resurfacing, fixing of the cracks of the tennis courts now? Are you speaking on behalf of the tennis players?
I'm talking on behalf of the pickleball, of relining the one court and fixing the cracks on both of them, the tennis court and the pickleball courts. But it would not require resurfacing at this point, I don't think. All it would require is fixing the cracks and repainting, which is a lot cheaper than resurfacing.
Thank you. Any other questions or concerns? Lady.
Gloria Cook, does that 16 to 18,000 include repaving in your costs?
No.
So why is it so high?
The post, it would require the installation of 8 posts. There would, there certainly be crack sealing at least, crack filling, and then repainting with special paints. That's at the very minimum.
So that figure is a minimum cost?
I would say yes.
Yes.
If you were to include the other costs, which would be your approximate projected cost in total?
If we're talking repaving, that runs in the hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Thank you. Councilor Ross.
Would it be possible just to put 2 posts in on the far sides and just run the net straight across all 4 courts? And if you just run it tight enough so it doesn't sag in the middle? Pardon me?
It would preclude people moving between the courts.
I realize they'd have to walk further around or jump over the net.
I think these are all discussion points that would occur during the process. Like we have to look at, first of all, having the council approve this as a possibility. Then we have to look at the funding of this, as your CAO has suggested. And there are possibilities under the Healthy Communities. I actually did a bit of research on their website, and the city has a great opportunity there to access those funds. And then it's the process of moving forward. Do we do 8 posts? Do we do 4 posts? There's a number of opportunities there.
To our CEO, Mr. Allen.
Mr. Mayor, one of the things that I would recommend the council do is consider the presentation by the group. Then maybe look at an opportunity for a small working committee to be struck to look at this for the remainder of the year, so we can come up with some solutions. Because we may also want to hear from the tennis community too, what their thoughts are. I mean, we're hearing from one group today, which is sounding like it's a positive movement, but we also know that there's others that use the court. So before we embark upon making a decision, I would recommend that we consult with the public to make to determine what the needs are, and then we can move it back into to a decision for council to proceed on, and then maybe pursue one of these healthy community grants that we would be able to look at. But in the interim, if there is some dangerous situations down the courts, we could go down and do some practicing to make sure that those conditions weren't going to be hazardous to the players down there. In the short term, it'll allow us to develop a proper plan for moving this forward, so we can see the courts develop the way that the sport is developing over the course of the next year and a half, to see us maybe get some grant funding and build the proper facility.
Plus probably we'll have the tennis groups coming forward for possible repairs then too. Any other questions? So would I be able to have a motion from council to refer the request from Mr. London on behalf of pickleball players to the regular meeting this evening? Councilor Ross, Councilor Thompson. All in favor? Councilor Butler's my apologies. Councilor Crowe.
Oh,
All in favor? So carried.
you had me at pickle. So where?
Thank you, Mr. London, for your
Thank you
patience.
very much.
Call it big and small.
Can I, point of privilege and ask for a 5-minute recess?
You are all ready to go.
Our next delegation is from the Rotary Spray Park. A request for early budget approval and ability to sole source material and labor in order to complete the project in 2015. Good morning.
Good morning, Mayor Conrad, members of council, and city staff. My name is Maxine Rosika. I'm on the Rotary Club Spray Park Committee, along with our chair here, Lynn Birch. We are making a presentation this morning on behalf of the Rotary Club. And before I get going, I do want to recognize a number of our Rotary Club members who are here in support of our presentation to you this morning. So I do have Murray Knox, Shannon Profili, Kathy Corlett, Steve Babakaya, Perry Saney, Gordon Nichols, Gary Smith, and we did have Kelly Thomas from the credit union who's had to leave. Rob Clausen has had to leave for Grace McGregor Area C, who's also a Rotary member who's had to leave. And some of these people were going to be speakers for a little piece of our presentation. In addition, you will hear from Leila Leander, Executive Director of Boundary Family and Individual Services Society, as we get into this just for a few moments as well. This morning, we are making an update on the club's proposal to build a children's spray park in the city park. And so just as a little bit of history here, we want to talk about the fact that in February 2014, our club made a presentation to the then council requesting support for the spray park project, and specifically requested council to support the Rotary Club's proposal to build the spray park in Grand Forks, provide the land in the city park to build the facility, select the park concept that council wished to build, and to sponsor foundation grant applications that Rotary Club wished to pursue. Council indeed did all of that, including supporting the construction of Concept 3, which is what we see here in the artist rendition. The city has chosen the site in the city park, which will accommodate the facility. And in July of last year, many of you will remember that members of council and Rotarians were on hand to turn the sod and erect a sign signaling to the public that a future spray park would be constructed on the site. We very much appreciate the city's public support of this project, and indeed the individual support from all council and city staff. Our club advised council from the onset that we would like to see the spray park designed with a water retain and reuse system, which would see the gray water captured in an underground tank and reused in city activities such as watering flowers, gardens, or planters, or used to flush the sewer lift station. We believe that this design will comply with the city's water conservation plan. Our partners in the project include various businesses who have stepped up to the plate to donate goods and services to this project. We have initiated a program of selling cubic centimeters of concrete. We have 40 cubic centimeters to sell, and currently we have 9 businesses or individuals who have purchased these at $250 per cubic meter. And of course, we are continuing to sell those as we move to hopefully starting the installation this summer. Phoenix Foundation of the Boundary Communities has generously partnered with us to provide tax receipts for donations. And the Grand Forks District Savings Credit Union, as well as the Phoenix Foundation of the Boundary Communities, the Community Futures Boundary, and the Boundary Family and Individual Services Society, and indeed our own Grand Forks Volunteer Firefighters Association have all contributed substantial funding towards our project already. So there is broad community support for the installation of this children's spray park in Grand Forks. Community organizations, businesses, and individuals have indicated their support of this project, and many with in-kind and or cash donations. And we do have some letters of endorsement, which we will leave with Diane for you to look at. There may be more coming. Some of our presenters that we're going to do maybe a 30-second endorsement have left, but we do have Leila Leander from Boundary Family and Individual Service Society, who's the executive director, that wants to say a few words just about the importance as a community supporter to this project. Leila.
I'm Leila Leander, and with Boundary Family and Individual Services Society, and we provide many children's and family programs to children and families in the Grand Forks area and across the boundary. Then our board of directors did make a very modest contribution to the spray park, and in doing that, the board really considered although we run many programs that are universal, we also run programs that are targeted. And those targeted programs often reach out to low-resourced families in the community. And in making the donation, we considered those low-resource families. So we have children in our community who have never swam in Christina Lake. We have children who never go to some of the beautiful beaches around the community of Grand Forks. And we thought about those children in terms of the spray park and that whole idea of evening the playing field for some of those children. A place that's safe, a place where they can come and enjoy summer fun with other children in the community. The other thing I'd like to say is we're located at the Glanville Family Center on the Curly School grounds. And during the summertime, we have many, many families who are going through the community who stop and pick up and play on the school grounds while they're traveling through the community. And we don't keep track of that number of families, but what we do notice is many of those families come into the Glanville Center and ask if their children can use the washroom. And I would say over the summer, we get between 50 and 100 families who do that. And I think the spray park would be another economic contribution to the community. Families who are traveling through could potentially come to the spray park, may choose to stay and have a lunch or a dinner in one of the local restaurants, may choose to stay overnight. I think there's an enormous economic contribution to the community that can also happen as a result of the spray park. So, thank you.
Thank you, Leila. And just so that you know the nature of some of the supporters, the Visitor Center has written a letter about the importance of spray park. And of course, Community Futures, Boundary has. We did get a personal one from James Creek, who is a Rotary member, but he also works for Grand Forks Realty Limited, and the importance of having a spray park. And Louise Courier, a Rotary Public, has also already submitted a letter of support. Additionally, we have worked with Urban Systems Limited, the city's engineering firm, who have donated their time and provided the design for the project on an in-kind basis at no cost to the city or the Rotary Club, and that is a significant contribution to this project as well. I take the opportunity at this time to thank Scott Shepherd and his team for all their efforts to date. In November 2014, Urban Systems presented to the club with the preliminary costing of the infrastructure required prior to RecTech Industries Limited installing the spray park equipment. This information allowed the Rotary Club to establish an overall budget of $400,000 in total, for which the project includes the donated and in-kind goods and services. And I'm not going to read out all of those community supporters, and I think most of you have taken a brew at those. But these are all people that have contributed to some of our fundraising efforts, and either in out and out cash or in, things donated to silent auctions, etc. So at this point, I'm going to call Lynn Birch to kind of carry on.
Okay then. The Rotary Club itself has raised substantial funding for the project, including $30,000 from our first ever Lobster Fest in Christina Lake Community Hall on September 6th of last year. The over 200 attendees were thrilled to receive a $50 tax receipt to support the spray park, and the club is currently planning our second Lobster Fest, which will be held this September, on September the 12th, at the Christina Lake Community Hall. And hopefully we'll do as well as for raising funds for the spray park. So why is the Rotary Club looking at this project? This started with a group of young parents in our community who approached the Rotary Club to consider constructing a spray park within the community. The club, in researching this type of project, found that many communities our size have these spray parks, and many were spearheaded by Rotary clubs. Your city staff will tell you that the project fits with the city's sustainable community plan, as it is a facility for children and may encourage young families to take a second look at Grand Forks. It is a barrier-free facility for children and will accommodate disabled as well as low-income family children, as there are no user fees involved in using the facility. It promotes healthy play for children, and it is designed with the water retaining and reuse of gray water system. It will accommodate the city's water conservation measures. We believe that the spray park has economic value, as it will encourage families to spend more time here in Grand Forks, enjoying all that we have to offer in this wonderful community. A lot of grandparents in Grand Forks are really excited about the facility, as it will provide a much needed outdoor activity for their grandchildren when they visit. So, where are we when it comes to fundraising? To date, we have secured 80% of the required funding for the project, valued at $400,000. And this includes the city's $200,000 contribution, which was in last year's financial plan. Generated community revenue includes the city's $200,000 contribution and other contributions shown here, including Area C, Phoenix Foundation, Community Futures, our own Grand Forks Volunteer Firefighters, FIS, for a total of $240,000. The Rotary Club generated revenue to date includes the Lobster Fest proceeds of $30,000, miscellaneous donations, cubic meters of concrete and other club fundraising totaling $36,409. And this is our anticipated revenue, which includes the Grand Forks and District Savings Credit Union, and we pretty well have that $28,000 confirmed now. The continued sales of concrete, if we sell all 40 of them, that's another almost $8,000. The 2015 Lobster Fest, which includes our WestJet raffle, which we'll be holding again this year, and the silent auction, and we're sort of budgeting about $25,000 in revenue. And we have secured donatable and in-kind items of $38,000, and this includes, we've secured the services of a plumber, of an electrician, we have some gravel, and of course the Urban Systems huge contribution that they've made to this project. So those donatable items total approximately $38,000. So the total cash, in-kind, and anticipated revenue to date is $375,000.
Thank you. And just before I talk about what's left to do here, I do want to recognize, I think I forgot to say Art Linnington and his wife Wendy were here. Did I say you, Shannon? Oh, yes, yeah. Anyway, from the Rotary Club. So what is left to do? We need council to confirm the original financial commitment of $200,000 in the 2015 financial plan. We need an early budget approval to allow city staff to initiate the pre-construction steps. So you have to appreciate that this is potentially a 3 to 4 month process for the installation piece alone, which we're also asking you to allow the sole sourcing of the spray park equipment to Rec Tech Industries based on the unique project partnership with the Rotary Club. Allow the sole sourcing of the construction of the infrastructure required in City Park to a local contractor based on the contractor's desire to partner with the Rotary Club and contribute to the project. And as importantly, through this whole process, we need Interior Health Authority's approval. And that is a big piece of moving forward, and we can't even start at some of those steps until we get those pieces confirmed by the city.
And so just in closing here, we need to keep going. And if we're going to build this project in 2015, we need to take action now. So we can construct the project hopefully in late summer, I would think. And we'll have our project by early fall. So we'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just curious, there was a grant application that went in last year, I believe, was it the Vancouver Fund or something? I'm wondering, it doesn't look like it came through. Are you able to reapply for a grant for this? Or?
Not at this time. Their granting cycle has completed for 2015.
And they set their priority areas as well. So last year, part of that reason for not being successful was that this didn't fit into their priority target areas for granting.
Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In keeping with the theme of water conservation, I'm thrilled to hear that you are planning on water recycling, repurposing the water. Is there going to be a sensor on this, or is it just going to be going all the time? Is there a sensor so that when children are on it, on the pad, that it is on, and then when they're off the pad, it's off?
That's a bit of a technical question for us, and I think perhaps your city staff could answer that maybe a bit better than what we could.
But our general understanding is that it is somewhat censored, like it has to be initiated. And I also believe, though I could be corrected, and again, you know, Doug Allen may know this piece, but it does actually have to be turned on and off. So it can be turned on in the morning and off at an appropriate time in the early evening.
Mr. Mayor, can we ask the CAO to give us any information about that? I don't like to think of it being on all the time.
It's not very
Mr. Mayor, it would either be on like a timer mechanism where we would shut it off, but it would be triggered, so the water wouldn't be flowing all the time. The water would be triggered by the timer and the activity. So I'm not sure the exact details on how that works, but the spray parks generally don't flow water all the time.
The spray park design does have an activator that the children would have to actually activate it.
And the system has all been geared to the capacity of the retaining tank.
Yes. And Urban Systems has designed all of that.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to our staff. I believe the funding for the city's contribution is included in the financial plan for 2015.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, it was actually included in the 2014 financial plan, and it would be a carry forward into the 2015 financial plan.
And that is an appropriation from the SLAG fund.
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Councillor Butler.
Through you to staff, Mr. Mayor. I noticed in our budget, I think 26,000 has already been spent on the spray park, and we're still looking for a $200,000 contribution. So I'm just wondering, that 26,000 that's been spent, was that out of donated funds, or was that already city money?
Mr. Mayor, that was donated money, and I believe that funding that came from the Phoenix Foundation that was required to be spent last year. So we would have made some equipment purchase as a result of that, because it was approved by council, so then we were able to make that purchase of the piece of equipment to meet the timelines approved in the Phoenix Foundation funding.
Councillor Thompson.
Yes, I can speak to that. The Rotary Club was not a registered charity, and so they approached the Phoenix Foundation with respect to giving tax receipts, and there was an agreement made to flow it through the city accounts to fund those expenditures. So it was at no cost to the taxpayers of the city.
Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just wondering, in terms of sole sourcing, if the majority of the funding is coming from the city, what are the ramifications of sole sourcing? Doesn't everything have to go to tender?
Mr. Allen.
Mr. Mayor, one of the common, it's not a very common situation to sole source in a local government, but when you have this type of partnership where people are coming in and they're putting in funding, such as the RecTech. And what RecTech did was they worked with the Rotary. RecTech and Urban Systems are providing their in-kind donation. So RecTech is actually, they're going to end up getting work out of this, but at the end of the day, they're selling their product. The other thing with the sole sourcing with the contractors, a contractor's coming in just trying to cover, his donation would be that he would pay, make 30% off of his commodity prices. What he would be doing is just covering his costs. So when there's a partnership like this, it is common that it could be brought forward to council for council's consideration. Our purchasing policy does require us to go out for depending on the value of the project, to anything over 50,000 to be publicly tendered. Anything between 10 and 50,000 would require 3 written quotations, and anything below between 5 and 10 requires 3 verbal quotations. But I believe that this has already been approved by council. According to our chief financial officer, council approved the sole sourcing of the project. So that hurdle has been accomplished, and I think that was related to the purchase of the $26,000 unit for the project, because it would have to, she would have then been in violation of the purchasing policy if she would have made that purchase. So council approved sole sourcing, and that therefore you've already made that resolution, so you cleared that hurdle.
Thank you. Any other questions or concerns? Councillor Butler.
Yeah, I was aware that we had passed that motion for the sole sourcing. I do still have concerns on that, though. From the research that I've done, it seems that Urban Systems and RecTech have worked together a lot on these different projects, and I was curious as to why we hadn't looked at other companies as well. Is it because of this in-kind donation? RecTech's actually putting in some in-kind donation as well?
All of the work that RecTech has done to date has been, we haven't paid for anything to date, so they've done a lot for us.
Councillor Thompson.
I think RecTech is also a proven supplier of these kinds of equipment, so, and if we've already approved the sole sourcing, I don't think that can remain an issue, I wouldn't think.
Mr. Mayor, just from our perspective, in local government, I've only seen this happen in very, very small pockets. One area I saw was pile driving in the lake, where it was a limited resource was available. I've seen it also for the creation of skateboard parks, where they work with the community groups, they bring them together, they kind of all, the groups rally together to build this project under the leadership of that company. It's not very common that you would see a construction company come back and provide that type of leadership to the community, where they would rally the community groups and work with the community groups and provide these services. Typically, we see them coming in, here's what you want, here's what you pay for, and that's what you get. This is a very much a collaborative process, so it is not very common. So to Councillor Butler's point, it does raise concerns, and I would not recommend it unless it was, something that was related to these types of things. And I think council's already made the right decision in respect to addressing that, but there is some concerns when it comes to always sole sourcing.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? May I then have a motion to receive and refer the request to our March 9th regular meeting for decision? Councillor Ross, Councillor Krog, all in favor? So carried.
Thank you for your time, your worship. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you.
Our next item on the agenda is our proposed bylaw, our chief financial officer.
Just kind of.
So we would be 2015-2019 Master Plan Bylaw 2008, and to give it its first 3 readings.
Stay in front, looks like.
Our CFO, Ross Ann Shepherd.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We are introducing, thank you, Council, Mr. Mayor, introducing the financial plan 2015 to 2019, bylaw 2008.
to be referred to the March 23rd regular meeting for first grade readings. So I'm just gonna review what we've done to date so far, and I know we have another meeting coming up. All right, so to summarize, in the general fund, we had reviewed this at the operating and the capital presentations. The average residential assessment for the city of Grand Forks is $199,000. Municipal taxes payable on the average assessment are $775.88. So at the previous meeting, I had presented 3 options to council with regard to property tax rate adjustments. The first option was to increase rates enough to meet our revenue requirements for 2015, which we needed to raise $144,274. So on the average residential assessment, that would be a $38.51 increase, a yearly increase for property taxes. Option 2 would have been a flat 2% property tax increase. That would have raised $58,000 and would have left us having to take $86,000 from surplus. A 3% property tax increase would have raised $87,000 and would have meant a shortage of $57,000 to be taken from surplus. So included in the financial plan you have in front of you is option 1, increase of $144,274, or a 4.96% increase in property tax. This will leave with the revenues for the general fund $5,357,000. The operating expenses at $5,112,000, the $235,000 from the slide revenue going into the reserve, into the slide reserve. And that would leave a zero balance to be transferred to or from surplus for the year. For the water fund, we presented 2 options at the prior meeting. Option 1 would have seen us putting $20,000 into reserves. And that would have been an increase of about $3.36 per water bill. Would have brought the new water bill to about $73.45, $3.35 per billing period, or $20 per year increase. That would have seen $20,000 go into reserves in 2015 because the increase would happen effective July 1st, and we would see $40,000 per year thereafter.
Should we ask questions as you go along, or?
Sure.
Do I get to ask questions as we go along?
Do you feel it's more pertinent? Sure.
Okay. I'm just curious, so the water fund is making $20,000. Is it going over by 20,000 what the expenses are?
The operating expenses, that would go, and this would go towards capital, because we do need in the water fund to be able to serve our operating and our capital needs, right? So that would put $20,000 towards our capital. And just in this year alone, I believe we have more than that going for capital. On average, we have about $200,000 a year capital requirements for water. So this would be a start.
Mr. Mayor, we haven't, this year what we're going to be doing is tying this, our 20-year investment plan for all of our assets, the $127 million that we own, back to that. So as Ms. Shepherd is saying, that we're going to put $20,000 in, but we have a $27 million water system that has a $13 million loss in value. And what it's suggesting here is, we talked about this the other day, we need a $2.9 million increase in 2011, a $2.9 million increase in expenditures in 2012. And as we move through 653, and then throughout there's several years that we have a $200,000 expenditure each year. So we're only putting in $20,000 where we need to put in $200,000. And we have a couple of years that we haven't addressed the $2.9 million in infrastructure that we need to put in. So again, this comes back down to how we look at our system. So what we're proposing this year is looking at it from the financial plan perspective, but we're to understand what we've got and then marry this to our financial needs over the next 20 years to develop a long-term plan for the community.
Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have concerns with that. I know last year when I was at council, I asked council if they planned on funding water infrastructure from the water rates because water is a human necessity. There are other ways that this fund could be funded other than raising money from the water fund itself. We do make an excess in electrical or other revenue streams that could be transferred into this fund rather than using the water fund as a money-making option. I was just wondering if council would just consider that as we go forward in this budgeting process.
Mr. Mayor, I think it's something that for us to consider the sources of revenue that we receive and how they're allocated will be something that council will, I think, will develop over the next year, that we'll understand where we're putting that revenue stream. It's council's prerogative to direct the revenue streams, but typically speaking, your utilities stand on their own 2 feet. From a best operating practices perspective, you try to make your sewer utility stand on its own 2 feet. You make the electrical utility stand on its own 2 feet. But we have the privilege in our community to have the electrical fund that comes in that spreads out the revenue across some of the services that we provide. So again, I think it's something for us to look at throughout the year, but I think it's an important thing for council to consider.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not sure that I would consider it making money. I think it's important to support our capital needs in the water fund also, and this would be only a drop in the bucket to supporting our capital needs in the water fund. So that was option 1, and that would have been $3.35 per billing, or $20 per year increase, which translates into a 4.8%. Or there was option 2, to put $10,000 into reserves, and that would see a $1.70 increase per billing period, or $10.20 per year. So I included option 2 in the water fund rates, being the lower option. I think the reason I included option 2 in there was to offset a bit of a higher increase in the general fund, and we'll see in the wastewater fund too. So the lower of this option, of these 2 options, was selected. And I think once we start looking at the strat planning and looking at integrating our asset management plan in there, we'll have more of an idea of an appropriate number to put into that reserve. So that will leave $835,000 in revenues, $797,000 in expenses, and that would transfer $38,000 to the reserves. $28,000, I believe we're spending on a capital project, and an extra $10,000 to start building up that until, I'm sure, next year. So the wastewater fund, I presented 2 options for the wastewater fund. Option 1 was an increase just to meet our revenue requirements, was $11,412 needed. And as I stated in the last meeting, that was mostly due to increase in debt payments now in the wastewater fund from City Park Lift Station. So that would have seen an increase in $2.15 per billing, or $12.90 per year. That would be putting nothing into reserves. In 2015 and 2016, we would have an extra $11,000 to put into reserves. That would be a 2.92% increase. And then I presented option 2, which would have put the $11,400 towards our revenue requirements and $20,000 into the reserves. That would have been $5.65% or $5.65 increase per billing, or $33.90 per year. Those were the 2 options I had introduced and had mentioned at the last meeting that I was interested in finding possibly an option somewhere in between there, so that we wouldn't see quite a high of an increase in the wastewater rates. So I came up with an option 3, which would increase the revenue to meet the revenue requirements of $11,000, and then put a $10,000 into reserves, which would actually see $3.85 increase per billing and $23 per year increase in billings. That would allow us to put $10,000 into reserves this year and about $30 next year. So that'll leave us $819,000 in wastewater revenues, $672,000 in operating expenses, $137,000 in debt payments, and $10,000 into reserve. Transferring from or to surplus. For the capital that was included in the budget, in the financial plan, all of the capital projects that were presented at the capital presentation have been included in this, only because of deadlines. We had another budget meeting since that time, and we have looked at cutting some costs on some of these projects, or possibly delaying some of these projects. So that will be changed in the one that comes to the first 3 readings, and I'll spell out for council exactly what has changed in that capital presentation. But what's included in this financial plan right now are the original capital to be changed. So are there any questions?
Mr. Mayor, are you gonna, if I could, Roxanne, are you gonna present the capital stuff right now and show them what the capital things were, so that in the areas that the council talked about, because council hasn't made any decisions on cutting those items yet, they were looking at them as a possibility.
Okay.
Do you have that here
I
today?
don't have it here today,
Okay.
no, I'm sorry, no. I have the financial plan, the Schedule A, as you can see. I'll just briefly review your Schedule A that you have in front of you. Can you go back up onto the regular agenda? So you'll see Appendix A, first is the bylaw. Then Appendix A, the first sheet is the summary sheet with all the funds combined. You can see the revenue, property taxes, grants and lieu, franchise fees, etc., 3.159 million.
We did nothing first.
There's the one. There. Okay. So this is the general, or this is all the funds combined, general, water, wastewater, and electrical. Then the next page is just the general fund, then just the equipment fund, which is part of the general fund in reality. The electrical, the water, and then the wastewater funds. Then we have Schedule B that is attached to the Appendix B attached to the financial plan. Oh, and you know what, Mr. Allen, we do actually have the original capital projects at the end of this bylaw. I've included them as Appendix C.
Okay.
Okay, so Appendix B, and we may want to discuss this, especially when council gets into strategic planning, because it does discuss our permissive tax exemptions and the way we're going to distribute our property tax burden, which is something that we'll be looking at in the next presentation when we start setting property tax rates. So the Appendix B, the first thing it goes through, it shows you the sources of revenues, where we're getting most of our revenue from. It then goes into objectives.
So could we just go over those numbers again?
Sure.
So we get 50% of our revenue from the property taxes. And what's that doing? We'll see those for us.
Sure. Can we scroll up a little bit? One more page. There we go. Okay, so we get 25%, a quarter of our revenue is from property taxes, grants and lieu and franchise fees, 0.71% in parcel taxes, 14% in user levies, 40% in fees and charges, and 19.5% in grants and other.
Mr. Mayor, is there any questions on the terminology that we have there when it comes to the grants or the franchise fees or anything like that? It's the time for us to address those, because, for instance, people say franchise fees. Well, yes. Mr. Mayor, the franchise fees are the provision that we allow people to transmit their things to our community. So gas or Terracid Gas or TELUS or Fortis or anybody else that's transmitting. We don't get to ask them for more. They just tell us that we're going to give you a little bit because we're providing the service to your customers. But we will pay you
1% of operating revenues.
1% of our operating revenues. And that's non-negotiable, but it's something that we get. Another example would be grants and others. So we get a small communities grant from the provincial government. And as being the size of our community, we get this annually, but it fluctuates because we've seen it go down and we've seen it go up. It affects our community drastically when they reduce the amount that they give us in the small community grant. But it's an operating grant that goes into our revenue. Roxanne, talk about the fees and charges for a minute. We just talked a little bit about some examples of that.
Fees and charges, let's see, some of the rental properties, income like that. When you come up to the front desk, it's a 50 cents for the photocopy, just things like that. Tax certificates from realtors, all different sorts of things that we try and recover some of our costs on of doing business. And that's basically the things that are in the fees and charges.
And user levies would be,
User levies would be sewer rates, water rates, things like that. Garbage rates.
Councillor Butler.
I remember when we went to our training session in Kimberley, one of the presenters talking about parcel taxes and saying that there's something that's really underutilized. And it doesn't seem like we get a lot from parcel taxes. So can you explain what they are and how they work and how we could get more from them?
Mr. Mayor, I can say that it's just another area for us to allocate the tax increase. So for instance, if we were to decide to do a major road improvement, and we said, well, rather than see increase in property taxes, we'll just put a parcel tax on your property.
What does that mean?
A parcel tax would be, so for instance, if everybody's share of the cost was $100, and it related to a 3% tax increase, another avenue for the local government to say, we'll put the parcel tax on your property, and you'll pay for that annually. So I've seen them do it for water treatment plants in communities where they say, you pay for your water usage, and then there's a parcel tax that goes onto your property of $785 a year to pay for the water treatment plant. So you'll pay for your water taxes or your user levies, and then there's a parcel tax that goes in there for your improvement. So it's just another way of spreading out your debt. So
It's like a lump sum payment for a specific item.
you can either lump sum pay it off, or you can amortize it over the year of the debt or the time of the debt. So it's no different than having a mortgage. You can pay it off. Here's your share of the costs. So when we talk about all of our infrastructure costs, the City Park lift station was an example of that, where we have $134,000 on debt on that, and that goes into a parcel tax. Am I right, a parcel tax?
It had been suggested when it was first presented to council for City Park Lift Station that it be funded by a parcel tax. We have not implemented a parcel tax yet for that. It is being funded through user rates right now. However, we could, if council so chose, to do a parcel tax for that.
I guess what it does is it really doesn't change the fact that it has to be paid. It's just a matter of what mechanism are you paying it with. So a parcel tax is still due at the time of your property taxes being due. Your utilities come in every 6 months or every 2 months, you get a utility bill. So it just depends on how council sees the best way to balance that burden amongst the residents. But it is what we have to pay.
Councillor Crog.
Where parcel taxes come into their own, and I think the best usage is if there's improvements or requirement for a specific area. Example is when they ran the sewer into North Ruckle. The properties that benefited from that were given a parcel tax, but it wasn't spread over the whole community. So you look at the difference between user fees and parcel tax, remembering that the parcel tax is only going towards property owners.
And one thing with the parcel tax is it's mostly a flat amount. So even, doesn't matter where you are in the scale for assessment, you could own a $100,000 home or $1 million home and you're each paying $30. So in some ways, that may not be as fair in some communities. It depends on how council wants to approach that.
Mr. Miller, I believe the fire truck is done on parcel tax.
We have suggested that will be one of the options that we bring forward to fund that. One thing for the parcel tax, a lot of times when you're doing debt, you can set the parcel tax so that it's the same amount of time as the debt. So you have debt for 20 years, you put a parcel tax in for 20 years, and you set the parcel tax so that the payment, what you generate from that parcel tax is exactly enough to make those payments for the 20 years.
And from our perspective, I think what it does is it creates a level of, for local government's perspective, I think it creates a level of confusion with the residents. I think that when we do these things, I think that Councillor Crog talks about it's a local improvement area. You've therefore requested it, therefore you will pay for your costs in your neighborhood. But when we talk about putting these different costs on the tax invoice that goes out to the customers or to the residents say, well, what do I owe then? What at the bottom line, they want to know what they owe, but they want to be able to, why are you putting it under parcel tax and why are you putting it under? I've seen other local governments do an asset management tax. So it becomes an HST, PST type of scenario. And I think one of the things that council wants to consider is clarity in the process. And the last thing we want to do is create this ambiguous setup where people are looking at it and saying, well, what are you trying to tell me? And at the end of the day, they just simply want to see what the bottom line is and know that they're getting value for their services. So there's some initiatives that we're talking about bringing forward this year.
Councillor Hammond.
So if it was used for a specific purpose, like a project, like sidewalks in the neighborhood or to repair infrastructure in that neighborhood, the homeowner would have an opportunity to pay out a lump sum assessment or pay it through a parcel tax. But either way, once that infrastructure improvement or project was complete, that would drop off of their tax bill.
Yeah, it's a finite period of time, Mr. Mayor. So if it's agreed that it'll be a parcel tax in the community for 20 years, each parcel would then pay that, be responsible if it owns that tax, would hold that for the life of the debt. So if the debt was amortized over 10 years, 20 years, like Councillor Hammond suggested, it goes, as soon as the debt's paid, then it goes off that parcel.
Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, the thing with parcel taxes too is that when you're dealing with water and sewer, if you've got vacant property, it's still being charged. And I've had experience with people that were upset at that kind of thing. So just a comment.
Thank you. Gentleman in the back.
Gordon Shaw from down in Johnson Flats. So am I led to believe then that we don't, because I don't have sewer down there, that I'm not going to be responsible for paying any of this $500,000 in the plant upgrade or this this headworks grinder or whatever? That's going to be covered under a parcel tax, or somehow I'm not going to be affected?
Mr. Mayor, one of the things that when we have the sewer works, we have these types of things, this wouldn't be under, I don't believe they're under parcel taxes. The reason that some of these things happen is they're a community benefit to it. So when the community, the public washrooms that we provide, the sewer system that's in the community doesn't necessarily reach all the properties in the community. One of the things we have to do is have an expansion plan to get there, but that community asset that we all own, we all pay for. So some residents won't use parks, for instance, but they pay for the parks. Some residents won't pay for, they won't walk and they won't use the sidewalk. So once we get under the umbrella of the community, we select these services that we're going to provide, and then we all share the burden on those assets. So indirectly, or the customer that has a question would be paying for those things.
Does that answer your question, sir?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So we're reviewing Appendix B, continuing reviewing under sources of revenue. We've reviewed that. Policies, the city will review the fees and charges annually to ensure that they keep pace with changes in the cost of living. We will be reviewing fees and charges shortly after the financial plan is complete and the tax rates are set. It's a pretty busy time of year to do it all at once, but we will do that soon after. City encouraged the use of alternative revenue sources instead of property taxes, and user fees will be set to recover full cost of services except where council determines that the subsidy is in the general public interest. Where you'll see things like that is in areas like the cemetery. Distribution of property tax rates. We will be considering this at I believe it's the meeting after next when we present the first presentation for setting the tax rates. It says when establishing property tax rates, council will take into consideration the amount of property taxes of other municipalities, the conversion ratios, which we'll review at that meeting, and the tax share borne by each property class and the ratios. Then it shows on the back page how we generated property tax revenue, where we generated that revenue from.
Sorry, can you go back to permissive tax exemptions for a second? Mr. Mayor, one of the things that I was just hoping to point out here as we move through this, we have the policies and how we set the tax rates, but then we have people that come forward for permissive tax exemptions. As soon as we exempt that person from taxes, then that burden has to be shared into the rest of the community. So the more people that seek permissive tax exemptions, there's less people paying it, and then more or less people pay more. So the residents, every time we do a permissive tax exemption, we have to consider the applications of these things because I think it's important for the community to have established this process, but it's important for council to not have too many of them being permissively tax exempted because there will be more burden on businesses, residents, and the industry to pay for those costs.
Should you just scroll on? Oh, just while we're there, right there, yeah.
Councillor Butler.
Just while we're there, since you brought it up, move past it, did you? Sorry, up or down. It just says, tax exemptions for places of worship and the land and improvements surrounding. I've had members of the community come to me and ask me about this, that the parking lots for churches are being taxed, is that? But this says that the land around it is supposed to be exempt?
No, just on what the church.
But not the parking lots?
Because if we take that burden away from Mr. Mayor, if we take the parking lot out, and that relates to, let's just say that relates to $100 a year, as soon as we take that out, then we have to put that onto the remainder of the community. And I think that becomes the question of how much can we continue to pull out of the revenue streams. Because as soon as we take away, and I hate using that term, but that's a reality for us, that's our revenue stream. As soon as we take that out, we have to find a way to replenish that or replace it, or just simply see the tax rates go up.
Well, we also want to look at the whole permissive tax exemption policies around the area, what different communities are doing. I know that there are some different opinions on parking lots and on NANSs, but you need to set some, the houses that they usually house. And same as the parking lots, you need to set some guidelines around that, because if you make it tax exempt, there's nothing from stopping them from renting out those areas, right? And they're making profit off it, and we're supporting a business, so we need to be careful on those if we do decide to change that policy. Okay, so if you could scroll up a little bit, Sasha, go up here, yeah. So the distribution, where did we get our property tax revenue from in 2014? Just over half of our property tax revenue was from residential, 1.7% from utilities, 27% from major industry, being 2 major industries, 1.3% from light industry, and 19% from business and other. Small percentages from recreation and farm. So then it talks about the conversion ratios a bit underneath, and the city will review and set tax rates and shift each property tax classification's share until council deems the share to be equitable.
Councillor Ross.
Where does the revenue stream for bylaw enforcement go? And is there any?
Municipal ticketing revenue would be what the revenue would be for bylaw enforcement, and I'm not sure that we have any at this point.
Yep. Mr. Mayor, if I could, one of the things that we strive to do when we're enforcing bylaws is to try to work with the community member to not find them first. The goal is to work with them to find a solution to the problem, because they're a resident in the community. There's all kinds of scenarios that come up where somebody may have been hurt, they may not have the ability. There's very few that are quite flagrant. But when we receive these revenues, it's generally not a big revenue stream for the city. We talk about potentially $100 fine for an unsightly premise. Well, we generally would go there. An example of that would be we go there and we find out that the person has been, maybe had a terminal illness, or they have a terminal illness and they're less likely to apply. And then, there's all these different scenarios that come up. But what we do is we work with the residents as best we can. So we generally won't see a lot of revenue when it comes to that. Building inspection, though, is where we get some revenue.
Thank you.
All right, so the next section is the capital projects. Testing Sasha. All right, so this is so small. You do have a copy in front of you that's also quite small. I'm sorry. These are the carry forward projects from 2014. It includes the fire truck, the spray park, a little tiny bit of completion on downtown beautification, the city hall rebuild contingency, which we will not be needing the whole amount by far. The MAPS project continuation, there was a little balance remaining from the work that was done in 2014. Then we have the water projects, water meters, West End fire protection, which is done under the borrowing. And so the bottom, West End fire protection and groundwater protection are the same project, and we'll be combining those two. And our multi-utility project.
So just to clarify, West End Fire Protection was the installation of the generators. So we weren't having to build the reservoir. We had 24-hour access to water. That meant that our power went out, so we put in the generators at the, I believe it was 2 sites, just the 1 site.
So those will work in progress.
You have to acknowledge.
Councilor Butler. My apologies.
Thanks. Yeah, with that groundwater protection study, we talked about it the other day. The total cost, about 82,000. It looks like that's been spent, but then you also have it in, I don't understand that.
Sorry, it has been spent, but it's sitting as a work in progress in our capital projects, as it was leading to the West End Fire Protection Project. So it is part of a work in progress as this, but we hadn't funded it yet, and that's why I put it there. I was trying to show exactly what we still needed in our reserves. So because we hadn't pulled it from the reserves yet, I did put it on both columns, and it made everything not balanced. So that's why it is the way it is, because we haven't taken it from a reserve yet. So it's not accounted for in our reserve balances.
And is that study available to view, the groundwater protection study?
Yes,
Is it on our website?
I believe it is.
Okay, thanks.
Councilor Hammond.
I'm just curious, on the multi, at the bottom, you've got 72nd Street, Highway 3 to 78. Is that money that's been spent so far, or is that money that's been budgeted, or is there any plans to pay 72nd for that road up by the hospital that we were talking about in the last meeting?
I believe Mr. Allen can answer that for you.
Mr. Mayor, so there's a subtotal there, but the idea behind it with 22nd Street and the other project, well, council will consider that this year because you have some grant applications that are going in, which then in turn you have borrowing that you've approved. So there was a referendum a few years ago in 2011 for the borrowing, and that borrowing would subsidize the grant. So if we get, for instance, if we get a grant for $2 million for our specific project, which I believe is 3rd Street, which is a multi-utility project, you would be required to pay 1/3 of that grant. So within that, so that's what the community agreement is borrowing for, because they want to see some of their infrastructure addressed. The other thing that the borrowing was for, it didn't necessarily have grants attached to it, but we strive to ensure that we have grant funding because we want to see where we can leverage the money with the provincial or federal government. So right now you have $1.3 million borrowed for the fire protection, or the West End fire protection and well rehabilitation, and then the other is $4.2 million for infrastructure upgrades throughout the community. We are going to be talking about that in a workshop here and then bringing it back to council. But the intent of that went to referendum, and it was 68% approved by the public and 71% approved by the public on both of those referendum or the referendums on borrowing. So that's bylaw 1923 and 1922. Oh, that's awful. I can remember that. But that's where we are. But that's what we've done. So as we talk about these projects, council, the money will not be spent on that borrowing until it comes to council. So your question on the 22nd Street, it will not. You will be council's decision to do that or not, and we'll bring forward options for you in that respect. Thank you.
So that is the summary of what we spent to date on that borrowing is $875,000, and we have a total of 4.2 that can be borrowed.
Gentleman back is.
Gordy Shaw again. I see a line item in here for City Hall rebuild contingency of $300,000. Is that due to the fire? I've specifically asked the question if this thing was all going to be covered under insurance, and I was told it would be.
Mr. Allen.
Mr. Mayor, what we had to do during this process is we were working with the insurance company, and the insurance company we had to contract out, and the contractor had delay claims that he could claim on us in the event that we were slowing up the process. The insurance company wasn't as quick to come forward because they had to review the claims. So what we had to do is have the contingency in there. While we were assured by the insurance company that these would be approved, they still had to go through their process. So we could not get any penalties from our contractor. So we were able to move through. So what we've been doing is balancing that. So the money is coming from the insurance company, but there were some little things in there that weren't approved. And I believe it was to the tune of, how much do we have right now? 30.
Oh, but we just haven't got approval yet, but we're hopeful that we are gonna get, we have left about $40,000 in outstanding change orders right now, but we're hopeful that we can get most, if not all of those approved, so.
They've been exceptional for us to work with, and they've, the past administration that brought in the insurance policy for us was very good. We're close to $2 million in damages in total. And like I said, we have an outstanding amount that hasn't been approved of 40,000. So the contingency was just there to allow us to continue to move while we waited for the insurance.
Thank you.
Okay, so I didn't have one more.
Councilor Butler.
I was comparing this chart to the previous one that we've been given, and I noticed at the bottom under grand totals, the year-to-date and the total cost columns have a different entry, a couple $1 million difference. I'm just wondering why that was from the previous chart that you've given us at the last meeting.
The grand totals are a couple of $1 million different. Yeah, I took electrical carry forwards over there because we had projects that were ongoing in electrical and I had put it originally as carry forward projects. Then after speaking with Mr. Logic, they're all the same projects for 2015. So when we get to the next page, you'll see the electrical is actually there now instead of in the carry forward projects. That could be part of it. I think another thing could be that some of those numbers have been updated. We're still working on our year end for 2014, so we're getting more info, new info day by day on some of these updated numbers.
Mr. Mayor, one of the things that our year end won't be done until the end of this month. So we're constantly reconciling our accounts because our suppliers and bills come in because we're such an enormous organization that we're talking, for spending millions of dollars throughout this with the fire project and everything else. The auditors are coming in to reconcile all of those accounts. So what happens is we pull it all together, try to create the balance sheets, and then the auditors will come in on your behalf to do an independent audit on all of these things. So there is no kind of wiggle room for the city in that respect. It has to meet your financial plan and all your policies.
Councilor Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and just correct me if I'm wrong. I assume that these numbers reflected our meeting last week where it doesn't.
Unfortunately, the deadline to have this submitted to council was before that meeting.
Okay,
For this
because
meeting,
there were some significant changes made, like repair rather than replace, etc.
And Mr. Mayor, it's, when I was talking with council, these are some options for council to consider, but it'd be your prerogative today to ask us to make some of those changes in this meeting with the public, so then we could help explain what we were talking about doing, because when we had that discussion, just simply floating it for, how we would try to stretch it out a little bit, but if council would like, I could go through a couple of those things, and because we have the ability to make changes as we introduce the bylaw.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay, so the one that you have in front of you now is the 2015 projects, and these are the ones that we're going to discuss right now. Is there any way you can make that a little bit bigger, Sasha? Even if we could just see the 200, the first column. Okay, perfect. Thank you. So the first couple of IT generator at 525 Central for backup, so we have phone use when the power goes out. Water and sewer SCADA software upgrade. Those are pretty critical items. We hadn't had much discussion on those. A fire vehicle, command vehicle for $60,000. And then we headed into some of the items that we had discussed that we probably won't want to discuss again right now.
And so Mr. Mayor, one of the first ones was the John Deere mower was a $45,000 or $48,000 expenditure. We had found an alternative to that we could replace the motor in that for under $5,000, and we could stretch the life out of that asset rather than replace it at this point in time. The dump truck, $170,000. I think what we'd like to do is defer that until next year till we can understand the implications to our revenue streams, but defer that expenditure of $170,000. The 1992 T-Tech trailer, I think we can get by with utilizing our current equipment, so we can defer that $25,000 away from the budget at this point. The Ford pickup at $30,000, we talked a little bit about that, and the request or the suggestion is, yes, we do need the fleet, but I think what we have to do is determine what type of fleet is important for us. Do we need more 4-cylinder vehicles? Do we need more fuel-efficient vehicles? Or is this going to be a workhorse truck? We could put it into the budget, but we might want to explore some other options with that vehicle. The JD Bleacher at $175,000. That was a nice to have, but for us as a community, we have to look at that. What can we do to salvage and repair it to a better state? And I believe that the recommendation was going to be to have $25,000 in the budget for repairs. And let's see if we can stretch out the life of that asset rather than fully replace it. The playground, sort of the library lighting, that comes out of the library trust. So that doesn't come out of our reserves. It comes out of the money that we put into a trust as part of the rent. So it goes into a direct library access account. The playground replacement, we looked at a couple options. As a matter of fact, Councillor Hammett and I were talking about a couple of solutions, and actually we're looking at the area out and around by the top park, and we're looking at do we want to have something a little bit more movable, and because could we an outdoor skating rink in that little area in the winter? So if we could have stuff that we could move out, maybe we could have create an outdoor ice pond there for us in the wintertime. So I think it's something we would want to explore, but I think it's the playground replacement. We should keep it in the budget, but defer it over to determine if we can get grants for it. The work shared fuel tanks, we talked a little bit about that, keeping that in the budget, but considering us integrating that in with the whether we need to own the asset or not, whether we could have the fuel provider provided to us in association with some of our fuel costs. So rather than us amortizing and replacing that asset, they could own the asset and we would just simply rent it, or we would look at the card lock system like you suggested. The headworks grinder was another piece that we essentially have to have in, because that basically deals with our solid waste. The electrical components are an integral piece that we have to have included into our system. So there wasn't really a lot of options there for us. Our engineer is bringing forward these recommendations for us. These are to ensure that we have a continuation of and limited disruptions to our electrical services. The long-term financial strategy, as we move down to the engineering component, the $50,000, what that does is that, and we're seeking a grant on that. We're hoping that that's going to come to fruition, but you can see it in the grant column here. That doesn't mean it's going to come straight out of our funds. What's going to happen is we're going to potentially get a grant to how to better understand how we marry our long-term infrastructure deficit with our tax rates. And rather than just making a decision today to put $10,000 or $20,000 aside, Council will have to consider the long-term implications of a financial plan that is actually balanced based off of owning $127 million in assets. And how do we treat this? Do we continue to own a lot of these things, or do we look at our business a lot different? The Fifth Street water main replacement, again, you can see that's under grants. We won't do any activity on that unless there's a grant that's received for that. The East Side Reservoir study, that's another piece from you look at that one. That one comes right out of the operating budget, and I believe that Sasha can touch on that one, but that's an integral part of what we're doing from operations, is not. So that 28,000. The GIS phase 2, I've just been recently working with the province on a piece there where it was generally going to come out of borrowing, but I'm working with the province right now through UBCM gas tax funding, where they would fund us as a community for performance management on our assets, because they do consider us to be one of the leaders in asset management, that we would be able to leverage that $100,000 from the province to fund our GIS phase 2 as part of our contribution to the rest of the province of British Columbia in demonstrating how to do asset management effectively. The Silver Kettle sidewalk, we see this piece as $175,000. It's a council will discuss this one, and I'll leave that for council to discuss a little bit further, because there is other options we can consider there, and I think that this was the actual sidewalk, was it not?
Well, there's two options there. There's extended asphalt or sidewalk curving road.
And I think council, when we had met about it, council and I were talking about the budget and looking at some of the numbers, and one of the things we'd like to consider is what are the overall needs? When we talked about this with the mayor and the remainder of council, it was, is this really the fix? Or do we potentially need lighting too? Or do we need barriers on top of that? Or is it going to be wide enough? What's the need? So we really haven't done a needs analysis before we got into this piece to establish the fact that we do need the Silver Kettle sidewalk. So I think what council is maybe would like to do is put that into the budget and then consider us meeting with the group and determine what the needs analysis is, and then bring it back to council to then have council make the final decision whether they're going to move on and how they're going to do it. I don't know if that's what the final piece is, Mr. Mayor, but and then the wastewater UV component is this is a big one for the city because it where we discharge our wastewater into receiving waters, people downstream are drinking that, and they utilize that as their water to consume. So as our wastewater goes into the facilities, just like above us, other people's wastewater comes up into our aquifer, where they discharge a big white or whatnot. It all comes down the river and into our aquifers, and we expect the highest level of treatment. We're not meeting our treatment needs right now, and this is going to be something that's going to be done through a grant program. You can see it's a 1/3 or 2/3 grant, but that would be upgrading our disinfection of our water going into receiving waters to a higher level of standard. And this is on our regulatory piece that the ministry expects upon us. It's not something that we can really play around with. It'll be considered to be a high priority from the ministry's perspective because of the overall impact. Mr. Mayor, I don't know if council wants to talk a little bit about some of these other projects or defer them out to the evening meeting, but we would be amending the schedule to reflect some of those changes not being on there. And then what happened is that these numbers will change, but it essentially will reduce the overall burden coming out of reserves and leveraging more grant opportunities.
Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm glad to see that council is considering maybe reducing some of our costs in this area. As I'm sure that everyone else here did, we probably ran on the platform of fiscal responsibility to the taxpayers. And I think we need to do due diligence to remove as much superfluous cost as we can from our budget before approving a 5% tax increase. I don't like the looks of that at all. We've looked at our capital projects here, but since our initial meeting, we haven't looked at our operational expenses, and I was hoping that we might be able to shave a little bit of costs off of our operational expenses as well to help reduce the burden to the taxpayer.
Mr. Allen.
Mr. Mayor, I think as we get into operational costs, we know we have fixed costs that we have to consider. And I think as council moves into this next year, if we want to explore that, we've got to consider the iceberg effect, that we see what's on top, but we don't understand totally what's underneath the water when it comes to that. So as we look at the areas that we would like to consider, I think it'd be up to council to, even if they made that a strategic priority, then we could consider looking at some of those things from a overall perspective, because when we reduce services, it's hard for us to measure that and quantify it without proper reports back to council.
Councillor Ross.
Yeah, I get concerned about false senses of economy. Having owned tractors and trucks in my life, sometimes throwing good money after bad can be a bit of a bottomless pit. I like the idea that we talked about last week around, if possible, depending on the number of hours and the mileage on the vehicles, is repairing rather than replacement. But then there's the benefit of sometimes putting newer vehicles back on to our list of liabilities, because then we have the benefit of depreciating those vehicles at a greater value. So I'm just wondering if that's something we consider. Can we look? Are we going to see figures again when we propose the reduced impact if we fix the mower and we repair the truck and we don't buy the trailer? I think those are things that we need to look at. When we don't replace the bleachers, we actually just repair them. Are we going to see those numbers? And then we need to also discuss how long can we do that before we actually have to replace it.
Mr. Mayor, yes, the Chief Financial Officer will bring that stuff forward. I think one of the things that we'll see in that $50,000 study that marries the overall 20-year financial plan to the taxation pieces, and understanding how many assets can you own, how much can you actually afford to own, and is there other options in there? They make, like Councilor Ross points out, some really great points. One of the things we might want to consider, though, is if we could lease this piece and not consider it to be owned to depreciate it, than the leasing company. So looking at fleet leases when it comes to these things, looking at different opportunities to reduce our overall burden and our value, rather than us being worth 127 million. If we can start looking at our fleet and looking at reducing the value of our fleet, then that'll drop this number, and then we won't have to replace that. We talk about this with sidewalks. We talk about, do we need sidewalks on both sides of the street? Do we need the roads to be as wide as they were? Because that puts a burden on the taxpayers, because essentially what's happened here over the last, well, I guess 100 years or 115 years, 118 years of the community, councils have decided to defer and just say, well, I would like to put a 0% tax increase, and not making the plans for the future. And now the council, if you look at the start of this timeline, one of the councilors said, well, why did we start this in 2011? Well, that was the time that it really became the timing for local governments to say they really must start to plan for the future and amortize this responsibility. Because of what councils don't want to do, and according to council policy, is you want to make sure you have a balanced approach, so you don't just dump the burden onto the future generations. You want to take a balanced approach, so you're passing the burden on equally. Because it is expensive owning a community, and the community can see that.
So council is being requested to give first three readings on this bylaw. Will we have the new numbers?
Roxanne, when would you have the new numbers on the capital fee?
I could have it for Thursday. Thursday is also the deadline for the next council meeting, so I have it Thursday to be heading to the first three readings on the 23rd.
That's right, the first three readings won't be until the 23rd, but we're introducing and talking about it today. But meeting on the 23rd, council can then look at it and come back and say, well, can we do anything else? I think that's your opportunity. If we talk about it today, we want to give it a breathing period so we have the time to look at it and consider it. If there is something in there that council is not quite comfortable with, we can simply move that line item over and we can freeze it for 6 months until we make that expenditure. We don't have to, we can get more information. But I think as part of us moving forward with some of these items, it's important that we do consider that. But if council has some concerns in other areas, they can ask me to request the chief financial officer to pull it over to the side and require another report on it later on, just to give council a great understanding, because I can appreciate what you're being asked to do is approve a multi-million-dollar budget, and you've been elected for 3 months. And we're asking you to go through all these steps, and I can only imagine and appreciate for council that this is just, it's a whirlwind. So.
Councillor Thompson.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Butler was making comment with regard to reduction operations, I believe. And I would just suggest that if we were to consider that as a council, that we would be reducing levels of service. And, I think that could form part of our strategic planning, is to determine the acceptable levels to our taxpayers.
Councillor Butler.
Once again, Mr. Mayor, as I stated at the last meeting, I'm not talking about reducing levels of service. In part of the operational expenses, there's a 2% wage increase for some staff members, and I'd also like to look at the number of staff that we employ and just make sure that we are being efficient with the amount of people that we employ and the wages that they're receiving. If it is necessary for a wage increase or not, I'd just like to look at that.
Okay, just a comment on that too, is that the 2% is part of the union agreement that we are in until 2017.
Mr. Mayor, if I could, we can't talk about HR issues in this is a Section 90 discussion.
Thank you.
Okay, and there was also when council was first presented the capital items, they were given a carry forward balance for the gas tax, and there was a question regarding the carry forward balance, and I thought that it was possibly $60,000 too high, and it is. It will be adjusted by $60,000. We had some extra. It's hard for us to catch up at year end, January and February. We're still receiving the invoices from December, and that's what our big rush is to try and get all the invoices for 2014 in. So we did have a couple of straggling invoices. I had caught it on the total cost for the project, but hadn't caught it on the gas tax balance yet. So it will be different by $60,000.
Councillor Butler.
So what were those $60,000 worth of invoices for?
For the water meter for that?
Gentleman in the back.
Gordy Shaw again. Would a pay per use, being water meters, sewer, cost per sewer and so on, would that lower taxes? Like if we charge for water and sewer separately, would residents of Grand Forks see a less tax increase?
Mr. Mayor, I think for us to explore that, to understand, once we were able to marry, bring it back to marrying the overall budget to this, the 20-year financial plan, taking greater levels of risk will defer that responsibility outward. So I think that's part of the discussion that we'd have to explore there, because I don't know that I can say yes or no to that right now. I think that we would just have to explore that as part of the overall analyzation of this. We know we're putting $10,000 away in the water fund this year, where we need to be putting $2.9 million into it. So we have to ask the community, we have to start saying, what level of risk are we willing to accept based on what we can afford? Because, based on our current assessment, we know we have, or the 2011 role was, we need to do improvements of 2.9 and 2.9 in 2011 and 2012. Well, council has to take the risk and push those out. So will we ever see the taxes get lowered? I don't know. I don't think so, but I just as soon have the report tell us the outcomes, and then we communicate that with the public.
But we could possibly entertain that idea.
I think we could.
Mr. Shaw.
It wasn't so much as to lower taxes, it was to get more revenue into the system, a pay per use. I came out of Richmond and I pay a significant amount of taxes in Richmond. I pay the same thing here. I have a larger portion of land here, but I still pay the same amount of money. But my costs for utilities are a lot less in Grand Forks, and I wasn't complaining in Richmond. I had services, I had water meters that were available. I paid for sewer, and I come here and I go, wow, it's, cost of living, cost of supporting these programs here is a lot cheaper than what I entertain in Vancouver. All I'm just saying is that if we want to get some more revenue into the system, I, for one, wouldn't mind seeing an increase in water rates. I'll probably get burned for this one, but charge more for sewer, okay? I still have problems paying for sewer when I don't get the possibility of having sewer on Johnson Flats, unless you guys would like to pay for my septic systems, okay? Maybe that should be entertained.
Mr. Mayor, if I could, I think this year the financial study it'll be a considerable amount of conversation with the public on exactly what what he was talking about in respect to this. What is the actual costs? Because these are some of the hard decisions that council has to make and the community has to make is what are the actual costs of doing this, and what does it look like with running a deficit budget? The other thing to talk about with the sewer is one of the things that we must do this year is develop a sewer phasing plan that's amenable, that works with the public in determining when we could actually afford to add those assets to our community. And not only that, what's the road paving plan going to look like? We consult with the public on those items.
Councilor Thompson.
I'd like some clarification. Mr. Shaw lives in Johnson Flats.
Yes.
And you do not have sanitary sewer?
Not hooked up to the city system, no. I have a septic system.
Is the sanitary sewer system available?
No.
So you are not receiving, on your utility bill from the city, you're not receiving a sewer charge?
Correct.
So I don't understand, I'm sorry, I just need clarification on your concern with respect to the sewer levy.
Because, well, for one, is that I'm going to be asked to pay for this ultraviolet upgrade to the sewer system. Plus, I believe this Headworks grinder is affiliated with the sewer system also, is it not?
No.
So I'm going to be asked to share in this cost when I'm not even hooked up to the city system.
Yeah. Mr. Mayor, it's not uncommon in communities because communities can't afford to put all the infrastructure in at once. So what they do is they have phasing plans, but in that time, the common amenity, and it might not sound, might not meet the concerned residents' point, but when we talk about having a public washroom, that has to be shared by the city. And we make that amenity available to everybody, but the discharge of that effluent goes into our sewage treatment plant that has these costs to it. And we still have to get rid of all the waste from that plant as well. So these are community amenities that we share, but looking into the future, if we had the phasing plan, we'd have to talk about funding that. But I think to address the point directly today, that's a common amenity that we share. And yes, the residents in the whole community will share that burden. Unless council so chooses to take it and say, no, only those that are hooked up to sewer, and then therefore their rates would have to go up.
Yeah, then the burden would be immense on the citizens that do have sewer, so it should be shared. Are there any other questions? Councilor Crowder.
Yeah, a couple of things about that, and I have heard the same concerns from other areas of the city that do not have access to sewer. If you have a sewer line in front of your house, you have the choice of whether you want to hook up or not, and you're billed whether you hook up or not. Like you're billed for that service. There's a couple areas in the city that don't have that service, and as the CAO explains that, we plan for it or phase it in. I think one of the concerns too is that there is no plan. There are no phases to complete the sewer project, so these individuals are on their own, and they're replacing their septic systems to keep our aquifer good. And minimum price, I've just said, is $10,000. So if that gentleman or another property owner puts in a new septic system and pays $10,000 and then pays for what we call the common good, as opposed to the fees that are required to pay for that service in user fees. So rather than give that burden to people that don't have access to that service, then I guess the alternative would be that the people that do have access to the service then pay for the service through the user fees.
Thank you. We are running a little bit behind on time.
We are. I have concluded my presentation, so if there are any more questions.
Councilor Buffy.
Thank you. On the carry forward project sheet that I had asked the other questions on the original one that you'd given us last time, there's an extra line item under borrowing for 3.2 million that's now been removed. I was wondering if you could explain that.
I'm not sure, I don't have it in front of me. Oh, that's the difference between what we've spent to date and what the balance of the borrowing, what we have left to borrow if we wanted to.
Okay, so that still should be on this new one as well then?
Yes, it should. You're right.
So that would increase the total in the borrowing account?
Yes, exactly. And that should be the balance, should be in that borrowing column, just so we know we have an outstanding borrowing power that we have authorization for. So yeah, we'll make sure it is in the first three readings.
And also just wondering if you could include the opening and closing balances for those accounts as well in the.
I hesitate to put it to the bylaw, only because it's changing until our audit's done at the end of April. I could try and get it in for after the numbers are finalized.
Until the audit's done.
We don't want to put any numbers in that are going to be incorrect. They will be changed day to day, especially.
If we do it that way, Mr. Mayor, we would be amending the bylaw every meeting probably.
Yeah.
Okay, so if there are other questions, could I have a motion to refer the first three readings of this regular bylaw to the meeting of March 23rd? Councilor Thompson, Councilor Crog, All in favor? So carried. Our next bylaw is manager building inspection and bylaws to give first three readings. Again, a referral to the Schedule 2-A1 of the Municipal Ticketing and Information Bylaw 1957, known as the Noise Control Bylaw number 1963.
Yes, good morning, Mayor and Council. These two, or this bylaw is a housekeeping item. It had come to my attention late this fall when I was looking through the bylaw that the Schedule 2 that was in the MTI, that the finable offenses and some of the verbiage didn't match the bylaw itself. And in order to get to a point when we have to write a ticket in this, those are critical key points on the ticket in order for, if it ever went to court, so that it would stand up in court. So what this was is to readjust the schedule.
Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I have no trouble with the housekeeping part of this. I was reading through the bylaws and the Municipal Ticketing Information Bylaw 1957. At the beginning of it, it states that when we set fines, they're not to be exceeding $500 for contravention of such designated bylaws. I looked in the Local Government Act. I'm just wondering where it states that in the Local Government Act. And then also at the bottom of both this bylaw and the next one we'll be addressing, it states fines of $2,000 within the bylaw itself. And I'm just wondering how that works with the MTI bylaw.
Okay, the $2,000 fine is a court offense. If you went to court with a case, that is a maximum fine that a judge could impose. It's not a fine that we would impose as a municipality. The fines we would impose are set out in the schedules.
Thank you. Any other questions? I then recommend Council refer the amended Schedule 2-A1 of the Municipal Ticketing and Information Bylaw 1957 to the regular meeting of March 9th for the first three readings. I have that motion. Councillor Thompson, Councillor Hammett. All in favor? And so carried. We now have our amended Schedule 4-A1 of the Municipal Ticketing and Information Bylaw number 1957, the Unsightly Premise Bylaw, our building inspection bylaw, Mr. Copeland.
Yes, and again, this is the same situation as we had with the noise control bylaw. It's just amendments to the schedule so that it can correspond with the existing bylaw.
Do we have any questions on that? So that would, could I have a motion to refer this amended schedule to our regular meeting of March the 9th for the first three readings? Councillor Ross, Councillor Thompson. All in favor? So carried. Thank you, Mr. Copeland. We now have a late item as presented by Councillor Hammett in regards to, I'm not quite aware of the issues regarding the deer committee. Councillor Hammett, could you elaborate on that, please?
I'd like to make a motion that we allow Gary Smith from the chair of the deer committee to make a presentation and a request to council.
Second. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Gary Smith, Chair of the Dirt Committee. We met last Wednesday, and that's why there wasn't a lot of lead time into coming before you today to talk about some of the things that are going on. I had a death in the family, and again, we were only able to meet last week. Fortunately, we had the biologist, Aaron Reed, who is our liaison with the Ministry of Forest Lands and Natural Resource Operations, and his upcoming replacement, which is Greg McLean. So they were both present. One of the issues that's come up in recent weeks was concerned by some citizens with respect to a couple of the collars that they had seen on deer, and that it's been rubbing off the hair. So they went out, they set about to have a closer look at what was going on. They haven't made a final conclusion as to why that's happening. However, the deer at this time are at their least weight, and they bulk up, so maybe the collars are a little loose at this time, and may, you know, as they bulk up, it won't abrade as much. But there was a couple of the collars that it was clear there was some abrading on the neck, so they decided that they would take those two collars off and then just continue to monitor the rest. So this is coming, you know, as a prequel to a presentation, a PowerPoint presentation that we'll be making at hopefully the next committee of the whole meeting to explain, you know, some of the data that we've been able to collect as a result of having the collars. Some of the things that have come out of the meetings in Ticton and Kimberley.
Which one?
Yeah. As far as moving forward with deer management in our community, one of the big things that came out of our session was the need to ask council to enforce its deer feeding bylaw. Why we see this as essential is that the province, of course, is asking communities with deer management issues to do their due diligence in terms of fulfilling the plans that they've set up before them. And of course, one of the big parts of that was having a ticketing bylaw to address feeding. Now, we've gone through all the other steps such as education, direct, you know, approaching directly the people that are recognized as deer feeders and trying to educate them away from that behavior. But where that's not effective, that's where we need to that's where the deer committee would like to ask council to direct staff to move ahead with doing just that, so that when we approach the province with our future plans, that we've done all the steps, that we've undertaken everything in our deer management plan up to the point of, and including the ticketing, so that if you know, more severe management options have to be entertained, that they are, and that we have the ability to do so. So that was a big thing. The other thing was that we understand, and this was what I got from Councilor Hannah, is that there's sort of a general pool that's being suggested for the council committees to take from. And what I would like to suggest on behalf of our committee is that as we've been funded to the tune of $15,000, we would like to ask for that to be allocated to our committee for activities in the future of this year. So those are a couple of things that just suggest are brought up to the meeting.
Councilor Ross.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Smith. I thought it was a legal issue because intentional habituation of wildlife, I thought that was a legal offense. And I know when I moved to the community, I was really surprised to see people in the city what could be considered baiting for habituation. And I thought it was a legal issue, not just a bylaw issue, but a provincial legal issue.
It is, but there has to be a means by which to do it. We have one conservation officer in the boundary area, and he is so busy dealing with, you know, predators and other more, I guess, you know, critical wildlife issues, that really to make a phone call to Dave Webster and say, hey man, there's a guy feeding deer over here, can you give him a ticket? It hasn't worked in any other community, and it certainly won't work here.
So, but can we term it intentional habituation? Because we're baiting the deer to stay in the city. And I think we need, like we talk about deer management, we have to manage ourselves.
Absolutely, and again, it's part of the whole piece. We're just trying to align ourselves so that when it comes to make stronger decisions with respect to deer management, that the province is satisfied that we've done our due diligence. And the ticketing bylaw is just a piece, a significant piece, an important piece in making sure that the province is aware of that.
Okay, just a subsequent, can I have a follow-up question right away? Do you know what the fine is, like what the provincial fine is for intentional habituation or baiting?
No.
Because, I mean, if we can quote actual provincial law or regulation above and beyond our own municipal bylaws, I think that has more teeth. It's not just coming from the city, but it's coming from higher powers.
But, you know, to take someone to Supreme Court for feeding deer is tying up a provincial resource that's already strained. If we can deal with this at a local level and, you know, basically do as much as we can, that triggers the next step in the provincial obligation to tend to their own deer, then I think it behooves us to just move in that direction.
Yeah.
We have it in place, right? So
Could we not take our bylaws and cumulatively document them and then forward them to the provincial level? Would that help the cause?
You know, I think that would be an excellent question to bring forward to, you know, the next time I have a meeting with some of these representatives from the ministry, as a committee as well, that, you know, that's something we can explore. But
yeah, because each phone call is not gonna gain you any respect from the conservation officer. But let's say you've got 5 or 6 or 10 reports, surely then they would act.
Well, they haven't. I mean, I'm just going on history here. So, you know, and again, as we've developed our deer management plan, we're trying to come up with means and ways that are both practical and effective. And it's just you know, the common belief of the committee that this is one of the necessary steps. And the province has basically pointed out to us as well that if you want us to be involved, if you want us to write a permit for a cull or whatever, this is what you need to do. And it's really non-negotiable.
Yeah.
However, that said, I think you're right that, you know, we can continue pressuring, you know, along with other communities, representatives from that ministry to be a little more participatory.
It's just a suggestion instead of just standing still and.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Your Worship. As I understand the request from the committee, it is that the city of Grand Forks does have a bylaw that prohibits feeding of deer. And what we're being asked to do is to direct our bylaw enforcement officer to enforce that specific bylaw. And if we had evidence then to send to the ministry that we have ticketed however many tickets that we have issued for violations against the bylaw, that rather than just a report would probably carry more weight. Would I be correct in that?
That is absolutely correct, yeah.
Question for staff, without sounding condescending, has there been any ticketing done so far?
No, Mr. Mayor, the original path was to do the Wildlife Aware program. I believe that they were, you know, not necessarily targeting, but they were concentrating on the properties that are known to do the feeding. And I believe there was information that was provided to them. But if council wished to enforce their deer feeding bylaw, you know, I think we want to discuss it a little bit more. But I think that, you know, you're going to end up with a process that people can still challenge you on that, and you stand in before a kangaroo court. This they would come before council to kind of plead their case, and council would then either have the ability to enforce it or not. At that time, it would then, if they chose to not pay, it would go on to, I believe it was a property tax?
No, I don't know.
Or if it's tied to the property. If we find the property rather than the person, then I don't know if we can tie it to the property. Then it would go up for tax sale at the end of the year if they chose to disregard it. So there's a harder line to take, but I think that it's such a sensitive issue that you know, it's a really tough one, so I would just, I don't really want to make any recommendation to council right now, because there is no way.
But understanding Mr. Smith's statement that we're gonna have no credibility regarding the provincial government with your management if we don't do something, because the information has been put out there, but nobody's acting on it. So we do have to go to the next level, I would feel.
I think so too, but I think Councillor Ross pointed out too, they passively downloaded this to us to say, you guys take the responsibility, we're not gonna staff up, you take the responsibility, you hire a bylaw officer, because we don't have anybody like that Gary pointed out, is there's nobody here to do the work. So what happens is they say, well, you pass a bylaw, mayor and council pass a bylaw, mayor and council hire a bylaw officer, and mayor and council take up all of your time dealing with the issue that really belongs to the province. And this is the passive downloading that we see, that it ends up costing the city maybe $185,000 in costs, whereas it generally would have came from the province. So that's a little bit of a challenge for the community, because not only that, there's other costs associated with that as well.
Understandable, but if the buck keeps getting passed around, nothing gets done.
Absolutely.
Exactly. Councillor Hammond.
Well, that's exactly correct, Liddy, but the provincial government has made it perfectly clear, even though they own the deer, in order for a community to request a permit for a deer call, they will not unless they've seen enforcement of the bylaw. One of the issues, well, the bylaw is, I think, a first offense of $50, and then it's incremental as I mean, the first one would be like a warning. I know our wild safe coordinator has gone door to door and spoken to pretty much everybody within the city, and especially the problem feeders, to educate them. But I think one of the drawbacks is that people are reluctant to talk about their neighbors or to file a complaint about their neighbors, because typically, I believe it has to be in writing. So I think what this council needs to do is empower our bylaws officer to be able to approach a residence if they see or witness it themselves, without having to have somebody put their name on the line and step forward.
Exactly. Thank you. Councillor Butler.
I'm fully in favor of enforcing this bylaw, but as I'm sitting here thinking about it and having a soft heart for animals myself, these people have habituated the deer to come to their house, so if they stop feeding them, these deer are still gonna come and look in their windows with these big eyes, and they're gonna feel so bad because those deer are there and they're starving them. They're probably gonna have a really hard time not doing it, even though, okay, go ahead, answer.
Councillor Hammond.
Those same people are gonna have a much tougher time watching them get killed, because that's the ultimate, that's what's gonna happen.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. I would just remind council that there was an overwhelming support for a deer call in the last election. And so while I recognize that there are going to be costs associated with enforcing the bylaw, if we want to proceed to an actual call, we're going to have to take that next step.
And just echoing Councillor Butler's statement about Bambi looking in the window, but if one of our young citizens ever gets injured or attacked, it's going to be a much bigger liability then.
No, I totally agree.
Councillor Krog, sorry.
Yeah, but I just want to, again, thank you for your comment. On the scale of management options, call is here. Fine, way down here. So if we can modify people's behavior, because that's what we're trying to do here, we're not trying to modify the deer's behavior. We're just trying to put it into, again, that habituation aspect of it. So I think it's just it's a prudent course of action, I believe that, and certainly less severe than some of the other options available. So if we were talking about skunks or raccoons,
yeah,
I wouldn't be here. We'd just be taking a 22 and knocking them off. So again, we have to keep it all in perspective. Right?
So we do have to start somewhere.
Right.
Councillor Krog.
Yeah, just just a comment about the habituation and them showing up to look in the windows and stuff. They will, but they figured out pretty quick that it's not going to do it. So the reason they may be looking in the windows is to see Game of Thrones or something like that, I'm not sure, whatever you have PBR, but they will figure it out and they will stop going to that person's yard.
Unless they dress up. But I have one comment also as mayor. If we don't do anything about the deer with either situation, fining, culling, look at our city, our sidewalks, etc. That's not very attractive for tourists coming in if we're trying to encourage tourism here and people to come in. It's not a pretty sight that you have to do a step.
I just wanted to mention, if I could, that the numbers are actually speak for themselves. This last count that we did in October saw 212 identified animals. And that's not to say we counted them all. That's the very minimum that we saw out there. When I spoke to Mayor Stetsky at the time, I asked at what point, and he was the mayor of Cranbrook, I asked him at what point did Cranbrook decide that they needed to do a call? 97 animals. You consider Cranbrook is probably 3 or 4 times the size of Grand Forks, and we've got at least twice the population that we can see. So
Just within the city limits.
We don't want the deers outnumbering the citizens.
directly within the city's boundaries. We are, and I just wanted to let you know as well that we are doing our spring count on April 21st. So, if we need a couple volunteers, hopefully.
Just one last note. So as the deer population increases, obviously our cost of culling them is going to increase if we keep letting them.
Yes, and right now, just so that council recognizes, the chief means of deer management to date is deer vehicle collisions. As a result, Grand Forks residents pay second highest insurance rates in BC. So, and when you consider the trauma that's involved for not only the deer, but the people in vehicles who are in these accidents, I think there's other options there that really are a lot less severe, as I say.
Very good point. Thank you. Councillor Hammond.
I know I asked this question at the deer committee meeting, but I'm just wondering, would you be able to update us on the status of the road signage that was requested last year?
Yes, well, again, we haven't had a chance to meet since October. So we do still have some ideas about residential signage. Ministry of Transportation is pretty strict on what they're willing to have placed along the corridor. But there's certainly other areas that deer congregate or deer people interactions occur where signage might help reduce that. I guess I paint that in kind of very colorful way. So.
Yeah, I think, Mr. Mayor, we can put up, I think, further answer that. Once we get a design or a concept from the deer committee, we could have signs made for neighborhoods. We talked a little bit about this last year, was like, whether it's a deer head that says, please don't feed me within our neighborhood, something along those lines that we can help educate continually.
Yeah. And these are the kinds of projects too that, having a budget allocated for the deer committee will help us develop what kind of things we'll undertake. So that's part of the point of having, a solid amount dedicated to their committee.
Plus, council will have to discuss more to make the bylaw have more teeth also, start implementing it.
There is a schedule, there is a fine schedule already in place, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I don't have it in front of me, but there are fines in place. And just coming back to, I think that, with the Wild Safe program that we undertook last year, and it was for a full year on trying to bring education, and it's working to a fair extent. But then there are those people who are just, they're just not willing to change their behaviors, and that's what we need to address. So,
thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you two staff, is there monies in the budget for deer management or for this committee?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, we have, as per last year, as continuing there was $15,000 a year for each of the committees that were there. To date, I believe that the deer committee has spent $10,200 approximately, with the continuation of the Wild Safe program at $8,000, the caller monitoring at 1,200, and then the conference piece, there was some expenditures there for travel and whatnot to sign up for the conference. So that's kind of where we're at so far.
Thank you. Follow up, Councilor Thompson.
Follow-up. That was the expenditure in 2014.
No, this is for.
So far this year, you spent in excess of $8,000.
Well, council approved the WildSafe continuation of the WildSafe program. We haven't spent it yet. The caller monitoring is a continuation, so that would just be the operating costs. So, and the conference was already attended, so yes. We haven't spent the money yet, the 8,000.
So that's year to date.
That's year to date.
We had a gallery member.
Yeah, Les Johnson, just an observation and a question. One, if you thought water meters was contentious, believe me, you bring deers out here, you'll have the gallery full every time. 2 years ago, when the school district said, you have to do something about the deer because they're making the playgrounds unworkable with all the crap, I suggested that maybe as part of the education of this bylaw, that you give the people who are doing the deer feeding in contravention of the bylaw, community service to clean up the poop.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an education thing. If they're already feeding the deer, it should be taking care of the other end as well. And my question is, you've got 2 deer that you've taken collars off of now, and there's 2 that still have collars? Or is that-
No, there was a total of 9 animals that were collared.
Okay, so yes, okay.
One died, and then 2 had their collars removed, so
Okay,
that's.
yeah, just wanted to clarify that. That's
Seven remaining.
In response to the controversial issues that's shared by everywhere, including the mayor and so on and so forth. Councilor Butler.
First of all, I just want to reiterate, I am in favor of enforcing the bylaw and I am in favor of a cull. But that's something because I don't see any other options. I was thinking about what's just happened with the Habitat for Humanity program down here, where the city has donated land and we do receive a 5% of their profits from their reuse and thrift store. And just in the hopes of finding another solution, I'm sure the Deer Committee has considered maybe partnering with a nonprofit organization to have a small deer farm and receive 5% or something of the proceeds. I'd like to see these deer turned into a profit-making resource, to take something that's negative and turn it into a positive. Am I dreaming?
No, and all those things are potential avenues to explore for sure. I did want to make just one other point, is that, in the interest of optics, I think there's been one oversight that happened last year with the planting of fruit-bearing trees on city property, and unfortunately, there's a couple of plums out there and a couple up at Overweighty that was very dear to me. I would suggest, and because I do this for a living as well, is that we replace it with some non-bearing.
We're contravening our whole bylaw.
No, that's to keep them regular.
Do we have Councilor Hammond?
Just regarding the $8,000 contract to WildSafe BC, is that $8,000 being borne solely by the Deer Committee through the Deer Committee budget? Because I know that our WildSafe coordinator does educate people on all different wildlife species, from rattlesnakes to coyotes and bears and grizzlies. So I'm just wondering if that $8,000 is going to be coming exclusively out of the Deer Committee's budget.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we don't have any other educational funds for things like that. So it would definitely be just out of the Deer Committee budget. WildSafe they didn't want an umbrella because I think it's provincially recognized as does bear aware and other things like that under WildSafe. So solely will be coming from that budget.
And I would hope that we can encourage conversation with the surrounding area D if they want to pursue that, to actually help fund that program.
WildSafe.
So it's not just on Deer Committee to sustain it.
Any other questions? Councilor Butler.
So I believe, are we still looking for a motion to put this to our evening meeting tonight? So we can only make a motion at the evening meeting to enforce the bylaw. We can't do it here. So if that's the case, then I'd like to make a motion to refer it to the evening meeting for council to make a decision on enforcing the deer feeding bylaw.
Councillor Thompson. All in favor? So carried.
And the other motion, of course, your worship, was to have $15,000 allocated.
I think that's what we were talking about just now. It's in the budget.
It's in the budget.
No, I thought it was a general pool. Sorry, maybe I misunderstood.
I think we're just gonna follow this, Mr. Mayor, if we could, we would be following, unless council redirects us, we would just be setting the budgets up to the way they were last year for that. So that would allow $15,000 for the Deer Committee, $15,000 for the Environment Committee, and $15,000 for Economic Development.
Okay, thank you for your time, Mr. Smith.
Thank you.
Can I have a motion, unless there's any other questions, to adjourn this meeting? Councillor Ross. All in favor?